Marty Starkey right there. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the West Melbourne City Council meeting to order. It's April 19th, 2022. If you'd stand for the pledge and a moment of silent meditation, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Mr. City Clerk, can we have a roll call City Council, please?
Mayor Rose.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Young.
Here.
Councilmember Bentley.
Here.
Councilmember Ditmore. Here. Councilmember Bachelor.
Here.
Councilmember Frampus.
Here.
Councilmember McDowell.
Here.
Please note that Mr. Frampus is attending by remote. Can we have a motion to allow him to do that?
Motion.
Mr. Ditmore?
Second.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second from Mr. Bentley. Any discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right. As we start this meeting, I want to welcome everyone and thank you for attending tonight's meeting of the West Melbourne City Council. Members of the public are welcome to speak on any issue, whether it's on tonight's agenda or not. Each person that wishes to speak should fill out a speaker card. They're located by the front door there. If you'd fill it out and give it to the city clerk ahead of time. After you've been recognized to speak, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to address City Council. Please address all your comments through this chair. Our first item tonight is we have some new employees. I'll call out Finance Director Margie Starkey first to introduce her new employee.
Okay, you come first. My name is Margie Starkey, and I'm the Finance Director for the City of West Melbourne. On April 4th, we had a new Assistant Finance Director start. This is kind of a succession plan dreaming for the Finance Department and planning for the future. Candace Blake comes to us. Her most recent position was Deputy Finance Director at the City of Cape Canaveral. They are also a BS&A customer, so she has BS&A experience, and she came week 1 of budget meetings and was running the computer for every meeting. She and Sonia were sharing. Prior to moving, her husband's in the Air Force, by the way, at Patrick. And this is probably his final station of duty, if that's the correct terminology. She was previously the procurement manager in San Angelo, Texas. I think with as small as our department is and as small as our city is, we could use some procurement expertise. And she is currently working on her master's degree in public administration at the University of Central Florida. So please welcome Candace. We're very thankful and happy to have her.
Candace, tell us about yourself.
Well, Margie covered most of my history as far as, my experience and everything. I started in local government in 2015 and that was just where I realized that's where my career was. That's what I wanted to do. And so here I am at West Melbourne to help me continue with that career. I enjoyed my time at Cape Canaveral, but Cape Canaveral is a lot smaller and there's not much movement there, much further for me to go. So I'm very happy to be here and very excited for my future with West Melbourne.
Well, great. Your former mayor called me unsolicited and said he was sorry to see you go. And so welcome aboard.
Thank you so much.
All right. Second one I'd like to introduce, and she may have been introduced maybe 9 years ago, is Teresa DeFrank. Teresa worked as a part-time customer service representative from 2013. She left in June of 15, just before we went to BSNA. She left to work on her bachelor's degree in criminal justice. She did get that degree, and she was working as a
Probation officer.
But since she left us, she's also gotten married, and she's a mom of 2 small little girls that I was hoping would be here tonight, but they couldn't make it. So when we had a full-time position advertised, Teresa, we saw Teresa's name on the list, and Wanda and I told Kimberly, okay, that's it. We just want to call her in and talk to her, and then we're just very happy. Teresa is very good with customers. They love her, and she is just great with them, so we're very thankful to have her back.
And the mic's all yours. Tell us.
Go.
Teresa DeFrank. I'm from Palm Beach, Florida.
All
I
right.
graduated from UCF. Go Knights.
Yeah.
Back, I was working with the city 2013. In 2015, now I'm back. Happy to be here. I enjoy working for the city and looking forward to return.
Welcome back. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have a series of public hearings. Our first public hearing is a small-scale amendment for city-owned Park Hill properties, and then we talk about rezoning those properties if that passes. So we'll combine those, and Ms. Fisher, our director will introduce that as she pulls that up, I'm sure.
Okay, for the record, my name is Christy Fisher. I'm the city's planning director. And yes, if you will bear with me one moment. Tom Bradford, you are here. I saved these are shows. Will they pull up so that he could see it? Because I didn't know we were going to be doing that. Okay. All right. As the mayor said, I will be presenting agenda items 10A and 10B. Okay, so what do we need to do?
For those that don't know where Park Hill is, that's the street right behind the, kind of borders the sewer plant. Nice place to visit.
But again, since there are some audience members here who were not in attendance at the Planning and Zoning Board meeting, as city staff, we take a look at the request, whether it's city-generated, as this is, or from other individuals who submit to the city from the perspective of compliance with the city's comprehensive plan or land development regulations. Okay, so the background of this is that it is the city as the applicant owner. So on the left-hand side of that slide, you have some of the information, some of the facts about it. On the right-hand side of the screen, you have some information about the location. The property is altogether about 4.5 acres, and we have, some properties on the west side of Park Hill Boulevard that have single-family residential, but they're not used as single-family. Those are just the residences, the structures that they're in. We have a property leased to Keep Brevard Beautiful for composting. We have 2 lots on the east side of Park Hill, vacant undeveloped property. The proposed use for the properties that are on the east side, so if you look at the aerial, I have a few polygons. So the polygon on the east side of Park Hill Boulevard, that's got the label of proposed potable water plant. That's where the municipal water treatment plant would be. And I have some other images. Some of the questions we were asked at the Planning and Zoning Board is what would such structure look like? And, the city manager and some of the management team can talk more to that as a planning director. I don't know what, that facility is going to look like per se. But just to let everybody know that, the existing, when we say FLU, that's an acronym for future land use. That's low-density residential is what those properties currently have, and the city's just trying to make it consistent with it being a municipal-owned property by changing that future land use to institutional. We did have the public hearing with our Planning and Zoning Board, and they're the city's advisory board. They're your local planning agency. That was held last Wednesday, and they did provide their recommendations, which are part of the staff report, and I'll give at the end of the presentation. So the surrounding future land use, you do have some low-density residential, as you saw from the aerial, with single-family to the north, and obviously you have some institutional to the south, and then to the west with a public works yard. One of the questions that was asked early on is whether this had anything to do with the city's sewer plant, and this is not an expansion of the sewer plant. These are for either, sort of composting, like I said, keep Brevard beautiful, or, a new city water plant, and that's drinking water, that's not sewer water. The second bullet tells you, we really don't have a significant, for a municipality, it's about 14 acres is the area that we have there. And the last bullet talks about as the city has grown, so as a need to provide potable water service, because we currently get it from City of Melbourne, and then it gets distributed through our pipes to all the different users in the city. So this is the first part, just as more for the audience. You all as council are used to this part of the presentation, that on the left-hand side of the screen, you have an image that shows, the color on the map. This is from the city's future land use map of the subject properties. And again, those are outlined, those polygons are outlined in red as low-density residential. And then on the right side of the screen, if the motion is made by council to change the designation to the gray, then it would be, the color for the institutional future land use. And a question that had been asked, during the planning and zoning boards is what would happen, if the land use wasn't changed, and the properties would still be city-owned. They could still be used for municipal purposes. This just aligns it more with what we're going to be doing. So as I said, one of the documents we have to look at is a comprehensive plan. We look at the Florida statutes, in terms of what we have in our future land use elements. So we have a chapter that's related to future land use element, and specifically that second bullet, the policy 2.6 talks about institutional, and then the next bullet is where I say, from the staff report, this is consistent with our policy to support the city's existing and future government operations. When we look at what we call a map amendment, so that's changing any of those colors on the map, then we do have some guidelines also in the policies of future land use element. And so that's what this slide is about. And so that second bullet does say that, institutional, of course, would be compatible with adjacent institutional city-owned properties. But again, I want to stress that the city has already had properties for several years on Park Hill. This isn't something new. It's just this is a new action to try to make it so that it is institutional. That last statement there is, again, to reiterate that the city will construct and operate its own potable water treatment plant. This potable water drinking well that comes, from underground in this case, instead of relying on the City of Melbourne. That's what the city intends to do on the one property. Just like we would with a private development, and you'll hear about that in the next set of cases. We do the impact analysis, and again, this is really more from what the state requires to look at, sort of the before and after, that if it remained residential, like on that bigger property, you could have potentially had, 23 dwelling units versus a municipal water plant that it might have. The square footage of the institutional is not realistic because, as I've mentioned to council and others, you're never going to reach a maximum square footage on a property because you have so many other things you've got to put on that property besides a building. And the transportation, the Park Hill in terms of access is the access for those properties. And what the city will also probably end up doing is connecting some of the public works facility to these properties. But that's something the city manager can talk to you a little bit more about. We thought that this might help. I didn't have this image at the Planning and Zoning Board. You know, it's not as though we're a large city, so don't think of, you know, large industrial plant. This isn't, you know, for the audience, just to clarify, this doesn't mean this is what it's going to look like exactly. It's just an example of a potable water plant facility for a small to medium-sized city such as ourselves. Okay, now we're going to 10B. So this is the rezoning component of it. And this is where we talk about, you know, what makes institutional zoning different. On that map, that's the future land use map, we have, you know, some of the items, whether it's residential, commercial, industrial, you know, sort of already in areas that it needs to be institutional. Is one of the few future land use designations that doesn't get painted on the map ahead of time. It's, you know, assigned on a case-by-case basis, and a lot of it has to do with the uses. So that's the first bullet where we talk about, you know, every single property that has institutional. It wasn't just a vacant piece of property. It's because the church wanted to go there, assisted living facility, in this case, a water plant. So that's when we look at, you know, whether we do institutional zoning and institutional future land use. So there is a lot of flexibility, you know, in the types of uses. And like I said in the third bullet, we can, you know, have it located almost anywhere, but we, of course, do look at compatibility and surrounding uses. All right, so this is the other part of the agenda. This is the rezoning request, and this is the map to show. Again, this is a little bit different. Zoning is different than future land use designation. So on the left-hand side, this is the current zoning of those properties. That's single family. Like I said, on the west side, where that rectangle polygon that we already own, we already use it. It's already used municipally. On the east side, that's where the water plant might be. And so on the right side of the screen, that would show if we do the rezoning, it would turn to that gray instead of that yellow with the green lines through it. Even though we've done the same sort of compatibility analysis, we have that standalone in the staff report, and that's pretty common with most planning departments. You do separate analyses in each. The Planning and Zoning Board, when they met last Wednesday, you know, they listened to some of the discussion from the audience. We provided some clarification. Like I said, the city management team was told about some of that, and they've already reached out to some of the neighbors in the area. So the Planning and Zoning Board, as your local planning advisory board, recommended for that first item is to approve the first reading of ordinance number 2022-07, which would change the future land use on 5 city-owned parcels from low-density residential to institutional. And then the second item, which you all, as you've done before, should make separate motions on each, would be to approve the first reading of ordinance number 2022-08, rezoning 5 city-owned parcels from the R1AA to the P1, with a condition that the small-scale comprehensive plan amendment is approved, and with enhanced buffering, including quality landscaping along the water plant property perimeters. So if you allow me just to talk about that a little bit, is that was a specific recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Board. Again, they heard what the citizens said, you know, about wanting to make sure that right now that property on the east side, you know, has been cleared. It's sort of ready for a water plant or, you know, some of the other temporary uses the city might have. When the city bought it, it had chain link fence along the north property line. The request was, please don't just have chain link fence. Please have, you know, if you're going to have a fence, have a nice fence, have enhanced landscaping. I did add to that discussion and talk about how the city does have a tree mitigation fund that we've collected some funds in. So the trees could be planted using those funds, you know, that have been paid by other developers to enhance sort of the buffering to the existing residential. So again, there's nothing on here about a site plan because there is no site plan. Yes, there is no layout yet for the water plant. It was just conceptually the Planning and Zoning Board agreed with what the neighbors said and wanted to make sure that you all understood that was their intent to communicate that to you. We did do the public notice, which is why some of the residents are here. You know, the city always does our legal advertisement, and we're not required to do the property owner notification of 500-foot ring, but we do as your department. So that was done also. And if, you know, I could have the city attorney read the titles of the 2 ordinances, and then perhaps you have any questions for me or the public.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ordinance number 2022-07, an ordinance of the City of West Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, amending the future land use map of the comprehensive plan to change the future land use for 5 parcels of land totaling 4.51 acres located on Park Hill Boulevard, south of Henry Avenue, and is more fully described herein, from LD Res, low-density residential, to INST, institutional, providing an effective date. And ordinance number 2022-08, an ordinance of the City of West Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, rezoning 5 parcels of land totaling 4.51 acres, generally located on Park Hill Boulevard, south of Henry Avenue, and is more fully described herein, from R1AA, single-family residential, to P1, institutional, providing an effective date. And I would just remind council that the zoning portion of this is a quasi-judicial matter, so if you have any of those disclosures to make regarding outside communications or things of that nature, and prior to the public hearing would be the time to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Any disclosures from council?
I think I might have gotten an email on it.
A public email that's in the record? Okay. Mr. McDowell?
Thank you, Mayor. Since one of those parcels is where the composting is at, I just think we need to be aware of that. We were out there as part of the ribbon cutting, but that is a leased relationship with Keep Brevard Beautiful. So I don't know if we need to even bring that on as far as part of the record.
You did, and we were, and so we did, and we are using the land for that, and yes. But I think most of this is geared towards the other side of the road where we just purchased the 3+ acres from the private person. Yeah. All right, so this is a public hearing. We have one speaker card. I'm not sure I can read the name. Jay Brockenhaven or something. Oh, thank you. Come on up, sir.
Hello, Council. My name is Johan Brockhausen. I live at 3363 Alice Street, which is, if you could bring up that map for me and show.
That's the only map I have.
No, the one with the yellow.
The zoning one or the future land use?
That one right there is fine.
Future land use.
If you
okay.
look at the top right corner of the change in zoning of the property, I'm the second house on that street. My concern is not the water plant. I think that's a good idea. It'll help the city, and I'm all for that. My concern is the value of my property and the property of my neighbors. You start putting commercial next to residential, it starts affecting the values of property. The water plant on itself, the water treatment plant on itself is, how do I say this, fences in slightly disrepair. The big white tank is a problem. You start putting stuff even closer and they cleared that land already. I can see where I used to not see it, that was woods. Now I see everything. I'm worried about the property value. I was at the planning zoning meeting. I brought this up there. I was listening in on a future planning and zoning issue, and the city was requesting that property to build a building would have to have some type of 3D landscaping to block portions of the building and to make it aesthetically pleasing. I know that's the goal of the City of West Melbourne. I ask you to do the same thing in this location too. And to keep my property values up, to keep my neighbors, also to aesthetically, when I walk out my backyard, I'm not just seeing a large blank commercial building that's maybe not aesthetically pleasing. I'm already seeing that now, and I would request, on top of possible landscape in that location and a nice fence, because I understand security, that we consider looking at the water plant as well for all this, I call them the girl streets, all the way down, and maybe doing something with landscaping to enhance that look as well. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
And just for clarification, the order of business at the Planning and Zoning Board was different than it is for tonight. So what this gentleman's referring to was an item that came before this item, and there was some discussion about its landscaping. But the Planning and Zoning Board specifically made this motion and this recommendation based on the discussion for this property.
Does anybody else from the public wish to comment on these two items? either of those two items for this? Okay. Thank you. All right. Joshua Slattery, please.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am coming up regarding Park Hill Boulevard. For the past few years, I mean, I've lived there my entire life, born and raised in Melbourne, Florida. But past few years since the construction, the clearing of the roads and everything, the traffic has gotten ridiculous. The dump trucks, the city vehicles, and everything coming up there. We have children on our roads. We have, well, in the streets, playing and everything. We've had complaints over the last year, I believe, from my neighbor, my family, having their child during the vehicles that are going 30, 40 miles an hour down the roads. They don't observe the speed laws. They don't care about them. We have complained several times, and they've ignored every last complaint that we've had. Maybe one or two was slowed down, but the rest, they just speed down without a thought. And the sewer plant to the west has always had stench issues, but this last year, it's every single weekend. Every time it's cool outside, they release whatever they do, and the smell just becomes horrendous. And it's hard to work outside. It's hard to do anything outside worth doing. So I just wanted to bring those points up as well. And the issue on the changing of residential, we just wanted to make sure that it doesn't bring down the property value of the houses in the residential, because I live right north of the left area of the properties that are trying to be rezoned. I just want to make sure that it doesn't cause issues, traffic, and matters as such.
I'm sorry, anything else?
No.
I was just going to comment on all those dump trucks. We had hundreds and hundreds of dump trucks to take dirt out of that area. Not this is what rezoned, but existing area for a big retention pond to help with drainage in the city. But that's pretty much finished. Yeah, all that, the pond's finished. Maybe there's a little dirt here and there, but not those hundreds of trucks like you saw. That was just, we had to get the dirt out of there to build the hole, so.
All right.
Okay.
The stench issues, is there any reason why it's more significant this last year? Or is it?
Yeah.
Because it's hard to even breathe outside, let alone work or do anything of value. So I just want to make sure that that's,
I know we had talked about that last meeting and the week before. I haven't heard.
I apologize, I wasn't here for that meeting.
Yeah. No, we didn't get an answer either, so hopefully we'll hear something about that. But yes. But thank you.
Thank you.
Cynthia?
Cynthia Rigsby. I live at 431 Park Hill. Josh covered a lot of my concerns. He is my nephew. We live next door to each other. I will tell you, with the dump trucks and all of the traffic, you know, I have a 3-year-old and I have dogs, and it's a major concern. Not just the dump trucks, but we constantly have city trucks going back and forth also. And I know that you made a mention that with the water plant, that's going to be the main access for the water plant. So I'm concerned about, this is a residential area with all of the commercial vehicles. You know, is there any other access to that end of the street so they don't have to keep traveling back and forth in front of our house? That's just one of my questions.
No, I think as you know, that's a dead-end road. So.
Well, it is a dead-end road, but I mean, is there any access from the backside of the water treatment plant?
I don't believe so. But.
Nothing. So there's no other option for the traffic.
I don't know that that's been designed yet, Mayor, so that might be
Maybe.
an option,
Okay.
but I'll let the city
I was
manager.
talking about currently, yes.
I mean, the traffic, dump trucks or not, I mean, and I will let you know that during all of that, we actually had law enforcement sitting in our yard because it was so bad and nobody was addressing it. So we, you know, took it upon ourselves to have them watch, because every time we'd call for help for that. We never got anywhere. So, but then I was concerned about the property value. Another question I had was, you know, the water reclamation facility is on the west side of Park Hill, and they're going to put the water plant on the east side of Park Hill. Is that a conflict of interest having those two so close together? I just find it kind of funny that.
Yeah, I think every council member has asked that same question. They tell us, no, it's not. It's
It's not.
the engineers say, no, those two will not bleed into each other. Yes.
Explanation for that, okay.
It won't be as tasty as the smell, right?
Well, yeah, it is, I mean, it's kind of heartbreaking to hear you say, you know, that on Park Hill is a nice place to visit because of the stench. It's not a nice place to live, and I've been there 27 years. And it is getting a lot worse. And I feel like the city is just kind of growing in around us, you know, so it's heartbreaking. My husband and I live there because that's where he grew up. That's where his mother grew up, you know, long before the plant was even there. So it's just kind of heartbreaking. So I think that's about covers it.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Risby.
Okay, thank you.
Am I allowed to talk?
Mr. Bentley?
Yeah, I didn't know, what is the plan on checking into this as far as the stench? I mean, you said we haven't heard back yet. Are we going to hear back? I don't know whose action it is, actually.
That was the city manager.
Yes, we did get some information from Jacobs, from Brian Masher, the project manager. His view was this was from the aeration of the digesters. We have two large open-air concrete digesters at the north end of the plant. You can sort of see it in this exhibit where it says Henry Avenue, just below the word Henry. You see those two large rectangles. Those are digesters. And in order to have the bacteria work properly, they need aeration from time to time. And so when we add oxygen to that to make sure the bacteria is doing their job so that we get an end product that is suitable for landfill disposal, it has to meet certain standards from Florida DEP. And so during the times when that oxygen is being added, you're getting more odors. And so particularly in the springtime when people are outdoors working in their yards and their windows are open and not closed in the air conditioning, that's when we tend to get the most concern about that. That's been going on for a number of years. We've really worked hard to treat the other sources of odor at the plant, but that seems to be one that has caused the recent concern, particularly on very still mornings. I think is when we've understand from the neighbors that that's when it's most noticeable.
So I guess my next question would be, why do the residents that live there say it's more so just the last year? I mean, I understand what you said, but I don't see what's changed. Or if you're going to say, well,
you know, we changed that. We actually improved the odor control at the headwork structure. I think that used to be a source from time to time. We hear from people in Hollywood Estates that are nearby. So that's really no longer a source. I think we're sort of narrowing it down to the digesters. And obviously, you know, people live there and they understand it better than we do because they live there. So I don't doubt when they say that they believe that it's not as good as it was. The concentration coming into the plant, because we've been successful in doing a lot of inflow and infiltration work to keep groundwater out of the sanitary sewer system indeed has gone up. And so I assume that's a possibility when the concentration of the influent is greater. We'll certainly continue to do all we can on odor control because we understand the neighbors are concerned about that. So we think that it's probably the digesters on those times when we're adding oxygen is the most likely culprit.
Is there any possibility of running those at night, maybe from midnight to 3 or something when no one's outside?
And that's when we do it, right? So that's typically will go between 2 and 3 a.m. And again, if there's a breeze, then we get about 0 complaints. If it's still, it can hang on until morning and people are out in their yards, working in their yard and so forth. So that's exactly when we have Jacobs do that process is in the middle of the night.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Ditmore?
Thank you, Mayor. Do we have an alternative for these digesters? I mean, I don't mean replacing them, but is there some other alternative to control that that would be more efficient? Maybe we've not looked at it because it's cost prohibitive, or is there anything that we could do that would say, we're not going to have that smell back there anymore?
Yeah, we've got a couple of near-term major projects at the plant, one of which is to improve the quality of the reuse water. So we've gotten a significant amount of grant funding that will allow us to have an additional step in the treatment train process, so an anaerobic part of the process at the front end. We think that will help sort of in and of itself. The primary goal is water quality improvement in the reuse for Indian River Lagoon benefit, but we also get some operational benefit of some elements that have had some deferred maintenance over the years. And we think that additional step in the entire treatment train process will help considerably. And that's pretty near term. We've got 30% engineering on that. It's a major undertaking. It's a $6 million project. In a little bit longer time frame, we're going to be looking at how we address the biosolids that come off the end of the process to try to achieve what's considered Class A biosolids. And that involves a new treatment of that, and clearly the digesters are part of that, and we can absolutely include some odor control improvements as part of that project. That I think, again, our goal would be to try to get some significant grant dollars, which we think could be reasonably readily available. So I think we can address this. It won't be tomorrow, but I think we can try to be good neighbors to those that, particularly those who've been here for a very long time.
So what can we do as a council to put that as one of our top priorities? Because I hear us talking about how we've changed this and we've got the smell down. I'm going to tell you, I've had the occasion to go down Henry a couple of times just in the last 3 or 4 weeks. And this is nothing against Jacobs or anyone, but I'll tell you, every time I've gone down, I smell it just cruising down Henry Avenue. And I'm not going to, maybe it's the digesters, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. I think the council, we should make a solid commitment to get that resolved, because not only do we owe it to the community, and I think the people who live in this community aren't going to be upset about fixing that problem for the people that live there. And it's either that or relocating those people and taking that amount of it, but we can't. There's just too much space around there. It's right in the middle of a residential area. So I think we should make it a priority. And I don't know what the rest of the council thinks, but look, if anything, anybody who travels through that area that doesn't live in the city, it gets a bad taste in their mouth just by rolling through there. So I think we should do something a little more proactive on a certain timeline that's going to achieve that result that we want. I know you're looking at that project and you're thinking it's going to, and maybe it will, and I hope it does. But I want something that's more concrete, that we're going to be able to know that that's going to fix the problem. Because I don't want to make these people have some hopes that they're going to get this taken care of, and that we're working on it, and then when we get done with the project, we tried, we thought it was going to work, but it didn't. I think there's got to be enough. There's got to be some engineers out there. There's got to be someone that's versed in this to go, if you do this, this, and that, you eliminate the problem. And if there's a cost associated with that, then we need to just figure that out and move forward.
We will ask our engineers who are at about 30% design on the additional treatment train, the anaerobic process, to tell us what their model shows for odor from these tanks in the after process. Obviously, we're not going to know for certain until that project is completed. We're probably still a year worth of engineering. Then we have, I want to say, probably 24 months of construction at the major project. It's the biggest project we will have had at the plant in a very long time. Yeah, and we will ask that question and bring that information to the council so that we can share that with the neighbors.
Let me call this next speaker, and we need to keep moving on. Michael Wilson.
My name is Michael Wilson. I live at 377 Dorset, right across the road, Henry Road. I just didn't want Johan to feel like he was the only person here and you to assume that there's only one person. I'm speaking for several people over here that we all concur the water plant is a good idea. The landscaping and the wall was the biggest topic that we discussed last week with it. They did a great job explaining it to us, the purpose, deep water versus surface water, everything. So I just didn't want to leave him alone out here like it was just one person, and then, you know, to make sure you understood that. But while we're on that subject, yeah, it's constant, not every day, but it's throughout the day stuff. You do smell that water plant. And I'm the new guy on the block, only about 10 years. Bill's only been there 1 year, so he doesn't count. But no, but seriously, it is all different times of the day, and it is consistently, this last year, been worse than normal. Don't know why. We've spent a lot of time at home for the last couple of years. We all understand why. Maybe that's part of it, but it is there, and I like the idea that was brought up that, you know, because there is a lot of people that's affected right in the heart of West Melbourne, so appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Does anybody else wish to address City Council on this topic? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Mr. McDowell?
Thank you, Mayor. Just real quick here, and that is the city of Palm Bay is implementing, they're constructing, nearly completed their new water treatment plant. And I did raise this question last week with Mr. Morgan because I knew there was a new level of sophistication engineering-wise. I had not heard the part about the anaerobic part of it, but I knew that the nitrogen would be removed and things that were real positive for our lagoon. However, we could sooner than later, to Councilmember Ditmore here, find that out. What is Palm Bay going to see those benefits, because they're very close to being done with their plant, so we can expedite that.
Thank you. Mr. Bentley?
Yeah, quick question for Scott. When was our sewer plant built? What year?
Brian?
The property was bought back in 1966. Now, the building of it is many phases.
Brian, you need to come to the mic, so.
Brian, isn't that from the 19?
I was the 6th grade tetherball champ at the time.
I saw your trophy, yes.
The property was
70 years ago, though, so.
was purchased back in 1966 for this purpose of the utilities. It went through many phases from a complete mix system to current, so it's always been upgraded due to population growth. But I'd say in the 60s, sir.
Oh, mid-60s. All right, thank you.
And Hollywood Estates has been in that area for a while, in Canova Park. And
Hollywood
Riplett's subdivision, which is surrounding it, in Park Hill.
I was just trying to figure out who predated whom.
Hollywood Estates came in 72, 74, I believe.
Yeah, but
Thank
the
you.
Riblett's and Park Hill subdivision were already in that area. Those plats are from the 1920s. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, I'm sorry.
Deputy Mayor Young?
Thank you, Christy, because I was just on my iPad trying to look up that exact information right there. So thank you. This is something that we've been talking about for years and years. I know I've been complaining about the odor there for years and years, to the point where we leased the odor readers, the one that we had out here at the corner, because it was that you couldn't have your windows down if you got stopped at the red light, because the smell from our little sewer lift station here was so bad. So we bought the odor reader, which you have now, and now you don't even notice it. So we went down to the plant and we bought the odor readers for that as well, and we paid quite a bit for leasing. So perhaps it's not working. Maybe we need to have it looked at, but there's something. This is not, you're not alone. We know about this issue. We go down there, we smell it as well. So I don't think this will go unnoted. So thank you very much for coming.
All right, to bring us back, we have on the floor ordinance number 2022-07 for the first reading. Do we have a motion? Mr. McDowell?
I make a motion for 2207 to approve the first reading of the ordinance number 2207, the small-scale comprehensive plan map amendment, case number SSA 2021-05, to change the future land use on 5 city-owned parcels from LDRES, low-density residential, to INST institutional.
Thank you. We have a motion. We have a second. Deputy Mayor Young?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, signal by saying aye. 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 Oppose? Motion carries 7-0. Next up is ordinance number 2022-08. Mr. Bachelor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to be clear, in this ordinance, there is explicit language that mentions the enhanced vegetative boundaries between the residents that are there. So this is written into the ordinance, just so the audience is aware. With that being said, I make the motion of the rezoning of 5 city-owned parcels totaling 4.51 acres located on Park Hill Boulevard, south of Henry Avenue, from R-1AA, single-family residential, to P1 institutional.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Second Rose. Any discussion? All those in favor, signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? Motion carries 7-0 on the first reading.
And we will follow up with the neighborhood to ensure that that landscaping requirement is met, and share our site plan so they're very familiar as this develops. We understand that direction from Planning and Zoning and the City Council.
Our next 2 public hearings is small-scale amendment for the Fred Boozer property, as well as rezoning of the Fred Boozer property on Minton Road.
Give me 1 minute to load this up. I may need IT again. I stopped sharing. Should I stop? Okay. Okay. And just for the record, we're going to do the same thing with these agenda items. There's a few citizens who are also out here for that. So they had asked me which agenda items were for the property near the intersection of Minton and Norfolk Parkway. So just so that they're understanding, they can follow along. It's agenda items C as in cat, D as in dog, and E as in Ernie. And because the development agreement agenda item is a little bit bigger, even though it makes sense to kind of talk about it all together, that's a separate show, but I can continue talking. I'm not much of a talker, as you know, so just shut me up when you want me to. All right, so this is one that's not city initiated. This is initiated by an applicant, the property owner, and they're calling it Sawgrass Lakes. They're also asking for what's called a small-scale comprehensive plan map amendment and a rezoning. And again, this is just to orient everybody. So the bullets on the left-hand side of the screen tell you that the owners are Fred and Ann Boozer. Their agent, Tony Masson, is in the audience, as well as the owner. And there's two requests. One is, again, for this, what we call a future land use map amendment, and the other is for the rezoning. So that's why we're looking at C and D together. And the size of the property that's being changed is 6.29 acres. So I'm going to try to explain a little bit, on the screen, because I did talk to a few of the ladies in the audience about this too. Once upon a time, there had been two houses at the addresses that are known as 3780 and 3820, which is why in the staff reports we still refer to that, because you can, if you're going to a property appraiser or something else, you can find this property in that manner. So those are the properties that have the numbers shown in white on that aerial, and those properties are like the little red polygons. If you look at the yellow polygon that we've kind of put over that, that's the area that we're talking about to have this proposed change that the applicant is talking about. Those properties were demolished, so it's now vacant. There's nothing on those properties, and you can see, for those who aren't familiar with that big black sort of spot in the back of the property, that's a retention pond. So that's not just a hole in the ground, that's actually a little pond. What the applicant is proposing to do in that area, that's, again, the yellow polygon, would be indoor self-storage. They can talk more about that, but we'll also get into some of that in the development agreement agenda item, so that's 10E. It's not as though this property is zoned residential. The whole property has always been with a future land use of commercial. And what they're asking is in that yellow portion to have industrial. Once again, your local planning advisory board on April 13th heard this item, and they went through and had some comments, but they also made a recommendation in favor of both these items. I talked a little bit about the history, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but I did want to point out, because sometimes this comes up too, is that these two properties do not have direct access to Norfolk Parkway. That's why in the little blue lettering, if you can see that, we have the words Norfolk Parkway, no access, because there's a landscape tract from D.R. Horton's Sawgrass Lakes subdivision that is along Norfolk Parkway, and that's owned by Sawgrass Lakes. It's not owned by these property owners, and so these property owners don't have access to property that does not belong to them. They have access to Minton Road. And because some people may remember also that in 2017, the same property owner had a proposal to rezone to C2, but to make some code changes to allow mini storage. They went to the Planning and Zoning Board, but then withdrew after that. So this is not exactly the same proposal. This is something different. It still deals with mini storage, but in a different sort of form and with different criteria. Councilmember Frampus, did you have a question before I moved on?
I did. Just a little bit of a correction. The 50-foot strip of property is owned by D.R. Horton and not Sawgrass Lakes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. The surrounding future land use, you do have property that's north of this that has both commercial and institutional that's owned by the Seventh-day Adventist. The property to the south we talked about, and as the clarification was just provided, that's owned by D.R. Horton, but it is one of the subdivision tracts for Sawgrass Lakes. And then to the east, you do have Minton Road. To the west is actually not where the subdivision for Sawgrass Lakes starts, but you actually have what was known as the old landfill that's not in the city limits, so it's in the county. So you do have some things around it that are vacant, or they're going to probably eventually be developed into something else. So these are the maps that show, again, sort of the colors and what the applicant is asking to go from. Again, the polygon is shown sort of in that yellow outline. We point with an arrow and say that's the subject property. The yellow to the west with sort of some of those funny little lines in it, that's Sawgrass Lakes. So that's the subdivision, the master subdivision of Sawgrass Lakes. The property, is shown on the right side of the screen with that blue in it, and that's what it would be if this did change tonight, so that they could have what they're proposing to do, which is just the mini storage. So again, we do our comprehensive plan review. We look at the consistency with our future land use goals, objectives, and policies, and we do say that industrial future land use is consistent with, the notion in that policy that you have industrial next to other commercial land uses, and that's what this would be. We look at capacity impacts, and again, this is sort of worst-case scenario. You would never have it so that you would have 68,000 square feet of industrial square footage. You can't get there from here in terms of parking and stormwater and whatnot, but that's what the Florida statutes kind of has us look at. And then in terms of the access, again, I just want to clarify, it would only be access to Minton Road. Some of the questions that came up at Planning and Zoning Board is, would they have full median cut access, onto Minton? The answer is no. The county's never going to give them full median cut access. They're going to have to, whoever comes into this property would be going right in and right out, on Minton Road. So this is, again, just to kind of, show you what I just said about the only access is to Minton Road, regardless of how this develops. That has really nothing to do with future land use or zoning. This is always the way it's going to be unless D.R. Horton gives access to Norfolk Parkway. So moving on to the agenda item labeled 10D, the M1 zoning is the comparable zoning that they would need if they were going to have the self-storage facilities. And then the second bullet is really the important part of this, that is sort of the linchpin that makes this more palatable to staff, is a development agreement that limits the industrial use to only indoor self-storage, not to the whole list of what's allowed in industrial, but only to the indoor self-storage in a specific building layout. So again, with the zoning, we tell you a little bit of what's surrounding it, but that's not much different than the future land use. And again, this is what the zoning map looks like, and the change that would be on the left-hand side to the right-hand side in terms of colors. And then sort of concluding with what the Planning and Zoning Board said, and this is where that notion of sort of buffering came up, but it really was with the development agreement discussion. So the first item that the Planning and Zoning Board recommended last Wednesday was for you all to approve the first reading of ordinance number 2022-05, changing that future land use on the 6.29 acres. And then the second bullet is to approve the first reading of ordinance number 2022-06, which would do the rezoning of the 6.29 acres of the 9.69, property in total. But that's only with the conditions that that future land use map amendment is made and that the development agreement is approved. So not just in isolation, but with those conditions. I'll try to answer any questions, and I believe you may have some citizens who are signed up for this item too.
Thank you. You need to read the ordinance. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Ordinance number 2022-05, an ordinance of the City of West Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, amending the future land use map of the comprehensive plan to change the future land use for the westernmost 6.29 acre portion of the parcels of land located at 3780 and 3820 Minton Road, and is more fully described herein, from COM, commercial, to IND, industrial, providing an effective date, and ordinance number 2022-06, an ordinance of the City of West Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, rezoning the westernmost 6.29 acre portion of parcels of land located at 3780 and 3820 Minton Road, and is more fully described herein, from C1, low-density commercial, to M1, light industrial and warehousing, providing an effective date. And just a reminder that the rezoning and development agreement items here are quasi-judicial items, so prior to the public hearing would be the time to make any disclosures if you have any.
Mr. Ditmore.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have to disclose to council that I have have had a business relationship with Mr. Masson recently. I insured one of his commercial properties projects down in Palm Bay, and I just want to make that disclosure.
I've discussed that with Councilmember Ditmore, and it doesn't rise to the level of a statutory conflict of interest that would prohibit him from voting. And in fact, on at least the comprehensive plan item, he would be required to vote because it doesn't rise to that level. On the other two, we discussed the possibility, they're quasi-judicial, that if there was an appearance of conflict, then he could choose to abstain, but really the interest is so small, and there's certainly no guarantee he would be insuring any future project here, that it's not required at all.
And just for the councils, I will not entertain conduct any business on this particular project due to the potential conflicts in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Frampus.
Thank you, Mayor. Probably last year sometime, I had a conversation with Mr. Mazzone on this property. He had forwarded me the plans, the previous plans actually, and wanted to discuss this with me as the president of Sawgrass Lakes. And I explained to him and through Mr. Richardson also that although I wear two hats, I can't take one off and put the other one on. I have to do it as council member and Sawgrass Lakes president. So that was the only conversation I had with him. After that was probably March or April of last year, and I haven't talked to him since. Thank you.
Thank you. And I too had a conversation with Mr. Mazzone probably over a year ago. And I don't remember the whole conversation, but I said I would like to have access to North Fork Parkway. And that's the only thing I remember right now. Anyone else? Okay. So this is a public hearing. Does anybody in the public wish to address City Council? Thank you. Danielle Shute.
Evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for letting me speak today. I just had a few comments about the parcel. I know it is set back from the street a bit, but I've also taken the path to work every day where I go through Central Park, which is also zoned light commercial, and it's not attractive to drive through. I don't want it near Sawgrass Lakes, anything similar. There are many automotive shops over there. There are surfactant shops, I guess, that's fertilizer stores, essentially. Refrigeration shops, collision and glass, all of that falls under light industrial, and it's not something that I want in my backyard in Sawgrass Lakes. I'm at 516 Horseman, for the record. I think I left that out. So I respectfully request that you deny the rezoning change. What we would like to see is a restaurant and a bar, so after you're sitting in traffic for an hour on Norfolk, you can drive right down and go somewhere nice and have a drink and not have to drive to Vieira or Palm Bay or Melbourne to have a decent restaurant in the area. So that's just my personal opinion and that of many of my neighbors. We've talked about that quite a bit. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else from the public wish to address City Council? No developers? Going once, twice, 2.5, 2 3/4?
Well, it's up to council whether they want to go into the development agreement, so why don't you, for the record, ask them then?
Tony Massone, 4275 Alyssa Lane, West.
Can you pull your mic up so make sure he can hear you?
Okay. Tony Massone, 4275 Alyssa Lane, West Melbourne, for the applicant. And to address the concern of the previous person, we are excluding all of those items of concern via development agreement. This has been something that we've been working on sometime since, like Mr. Frampus said, 2021, when I had contacted him as capacity of HOA president. And it's one of the things that probably worth pointing out, because I know concern, even though it hasn't come up at this time, that often traffic is a concern, that this rezoning and use is pretty much probably one of the lowest trip counts and traffic generators that we could possibly have on that property. And I'm available for any questions if you have any that.
And I think Mr. Massone is asking whether you want to look at the development agreement now. I think that's his point of.
Yes, and also I was wondering if you could show the elevation of a proposed.
Yeah, that's going to be with the development agreement. That's not with these two items. But it might make more sense. It might answer some of the audience's questions too.
Mr. Ditmore?
I just have a question. So we're talking about rezoning that back parcel area, and then the front parcel area.
That remains commercial. That doesn't,
remains commercial. So the trip count's going to be really with that commercial area, depending on what
that's
you
right.
put in there.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I wanted.
Industrial, indoor storage is not going to generate very many trips, but yeah, the commercial obviously could, because you don't know what it could potentially have.
This is going to be indoors, no potential garage pull-ups, anything like that.
Yeah, and that's why Mr. Masson asked me to show a rendering, but that's with the next agenda item, 10E. I'm happy to show that now and kind of go through that presentation. So it's whatever's the pleasure of council.
Let's see what else the council is saying. Deputy Mayor Young?
Thank you. So about an inch and a half above that white area, that is the church that's there, and that's also the entrance to Carriage Gate back there, and that's where the new subdivision is going in right there.
That's right.
Okay, and then across the street, across Minton, what is now nice and green foliage is 2 apartment complexes going in there.
That's correct.
Okay.
There isn't this still the property that's owned by the Carassi family right at the hard corner? And the apartments are actually to the north. See what looks like kind of a path here, like a little circle almost. That's where some of the apartments are going in through here. This hard corner here is still owned by the Carassi family, and that could be something commercial. But you're absolutely correct. If the folks wanted to follow my cursor here, this Carriage Gate entrance, has what the Seventh-day Adventist has this. Once upon a time, they wanted to have a church here. They had submitted some plans for that. So it's not as though it's residential. It appears residential because it's still the structures that it has, but that already has the industrial zoning. It could be a church. And then you're absolutely correct that to the north of that is where that new, I think it's a 25-lot subdivision would be going. So, yeah, you have some uses all around it.
55.
54, that's what it is. Yeah, 54 lots.
Okay, and the units coming across the street, those are 4-story apartments.
They are. They would be the 4-story apartments that you had seen in that one development agreement. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and can you go back a slide, which shows a little yellow, another.
Here?
Oh, okay. So the yellow part here in the back, is that Sawgrass Lakes?
Yes, so.
In the little
and
finger
using
of
the
yellow
cursor,
there, that's Sawgrass Lakes as well?
This is all Sawgrass Lakes, and then this is where we're talking about those 54 new homes would go. What this doesn't include is this area in white. So anything with this dark line is in our city limits, and so this area that's in white is in the county, and this is the landfill. A lot of folks, know this only because of that little metal building that's at the top of the road. So this is kind of like near the top of the road, and that's the property that's in between, where maybe Seventh-day Adventist would have a church, and this, and the Sawgrass Lakes folks. And then Carriage Gate in that subdivision is further up north here.
All right, so my focus is the gray area. What is the gray area?
Yeah, the gray area is where Seventh-day Adventist owns.
Okay, that's what they own.
Looks like houses and has that little school
So
in it.
whatever they put in there is going to be the break between Sawgrass and this proposed project.
Right.
If they put nothing there, it'll just be open land the way it is now.
Right.
And if they
build a
there-
church, then they build a church. Yeah.
Okay. All right, that answers my question. Thank you.
Mr. Frampus?
Thank you, Mayor. Couple questions. Where's the retention pond going to be on this piece of property? Because according to your yellow outline there, it looks like your industrial zone is going to be taking up most of that piece. Where's the retention area going to be for the water?
Are you talking about the existing? Because remember, when they develop, they have to develop to a different standard than what that retention pond is. So let me get to an aerial and kind of try to describe it in words. What you have, again, is this area that's not in any color. That's part of the overall Sawgrass Lakes subdivision as a pond. And then you have a pond on the site that in order to develop on this site, they would have to partially fill. But again, I don't know what, the qualities are of this lake. it doesn't matter. All that matters is what the current, code is from St. John's River Water Management District, Melbourne-Tillman Water Control District, and that's what they would have to build to, which could mean that besides bringing in fill, that they're making things a little deeper, that they're having to sort of, buffer stuff off so that, they don't have people going into ponds. So don't think of, this black area as being where necessarily they're going to have it. And we can certainly go to the agenda item about development agreement if you want to see their conceptual layout, but they do not have engineer drawings to the city yet.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't see the retention area in the conceptual drawings. That's why I was asking. I wanted to make sure they weren't, I don't know, using the Sawgrass or the D.R. Horton retention area as part of their retention pond.
Yeah, and that's a great question, but just so that everybody understands, when each site develops, they've got to have their own on-site retention. They do not get to share unless there's specific agreements with others to share facilities. But no, on their own, they don't get to just, dump water into the neighbor's property.
And I had a question on the development agreement. If this does in fact get approved, is the developer willing to add to the development agreement that they won't try to gain access to Norfolk Parkway?
Why don't we then present the development agreement so you all can chime in on that if you'd like?
You have another question, Mr.
You wanted to talk about this now, right? The development agreement, so it would be nice to.
I think we ought to talk about the big picture first.
Approved.
We'll get there. We're not there yet. We'll get there, Mr. Francis, because it's an important component.
That's why they brought Mr. Mazzone up to talk about the development agreement, right?
Yeah, the development agreement may answer some of those other questions.
Okay, we'll skip to that, but,
Okay.
and then we'll go back.
Okay.
So I guess what I'm asking, you're going to skip the development agreement. Okay, sorry.
Yes, that's what she's doing now, pulling up the development agreement.
Yeah, just give me 1 minute, please. Okay.
In the development agreement, we have some renderings, and it also,
Council member, can you see the presentation yet?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, I'm not going to go through this because we already did, but I am going to talk a little bit about what a development agreement means, mostly for the audience. It's a mechanism which contains additional conditions, and it may contain waivers to land development regulation. This one really doesn't, and it does go through a process. It's another way of providing assurances to address any features that might add compatibility with the surrounding area. This agreement will limit the use of the development and require additional landscaping and some other items. The last bullet I have on the summary is that the applicant has agreed to limit the use, the size of interior units, hours of operation, facade treatments, and provide additional landscaping next to Norfolk Parkway. So again, we do this whole review of the consistency with the city's comprehensive plan. And, we do believe that, going through the specific language that's in the development agreement, which is public records, it's also on the city's website with this agenda item, that it's consistent with some of the priorities we have for community design. It does integrate with the land use patterns by talking about specific buffering measures and talking about the enhanced exterior features and landscaping. We have a policy in the comprehensive plan about redevelopment. The properties that had the houses are now just vacant fields. They're not really kept up very well, so this would, redevelop those areas. Again, some of the specifics, we're not taking the 15 pages of development agreement and giving you a slide on each one. We're just sort of summarizing it, is that there would be no outside storage. We're not talking about the typical mini storage that you pull up to, you roll up the bay door, you dump your items, and they sell on the Storage Wars or whatever the TV shows are. We're not talking about those items. There also is a prohibition about not being a vehicle storage area. So I don't know whether the property that is the landfill is going to continue with the notion that they had of the sort of the RV and vehicle storage lot. That was a proposal that I heard about in 2018. So I'm not quite sure what the status is of that, but again, that's to the west of this. The hours of operation on this, per the development agreement, would be limited from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. That would be baked into their lease agreements with their tenants. And there's not going to be a caretaker dwelling unit with this one. And then significantly, the fourth bullet, there's not going to be any exterior door openings for any of the storage units facing either Norfolk Parkway or Minton Road. So it's all interior to the building. The next one has to do with sort of that tunnel that goes through the middle of the building, making sure it's the right size, and that same tunnel, the offloading area, is internal to the building. One thing we talked about the city planning and zoning board meeting last Wednesday was about having one sign that sort of advertised not just this use, but then also some of the commercial uses up front, and having that be on Minton. There was discussion at the planning and zoning board about enhanced landscaping, and we actually get into those details and what that means in the development agreement. And then the third bullet, talking about the unit sizes, that actually limits this type of use so that it is more personal storage and it's not businesses. But there is some prohibition there about not giving leases to anyone who's an identified business who's going to have a business tax receipt, and that would be their self-limit, to make sure, again, this is personal storage and it doesn't turn into auto repair or some of the other uses that were stated. The next bullet, again, has to do with the treatment of that building and the maximum height of 35 feet that came up in discussion. How tall is this going to be? And then this has to do with the duration. And one of the questions that came up is, the duration of this development agreement is perpetual with the property. It doesn't just go away in a year. This is what Mr. Masson, I believe, wanted me to show. This is one of the documents that accompanies that development agreement. So you're looking at sort of that corner of Norfolk Parkway, Minton Road. And again, I'm going to use my cursor to kind of point out that, this landscape area, some of this landscape area is not their property. That's the D.R. Horton property, and then their property begins behind it. This does not show property lines, so please don't take it like it's showing a property line. All that has to be submitted to the city. They have to go through engineer review, et cetera. And this is what I'll let Mr. Masson talk about his potential uses up front. And then the self-storage building here in the rear with this central entrance. And in that development agreement, we also talked about, unlike a lot of people, talk about the Cube Smart on Vieira Boulevard and how it looks, et cetera. That one, you can see the units inside. This will have frosted glass or something dark, so you're not seeing units either. So you're not really going to be seeing what's inside this building if you're standing there at Minton or Norfolk Parkway. That's just another view of the front side from Minton Road. And then this is their layout. So this maybe, council member, answers some of your question. That uses some of that stormwater pond that you saw in the back. Again, it's not an engineer drawing, so it may not end up looking exactly like that. It might be deeper, it might be wider, it could be lots of different things depending on what the soils test and all the engineering analysis that has to go in it. But then that building in front of it and the proposal, out towards Minton, it does not show a zoning line on here. This is just an overall conceptual what that could look like. And then this was the conclusion. Again, in our staff report, we felt that with these limits, with the 14 pages of all the criteria and whatnot, this is the only way staff could support this industrial future land use and the rezoning is with the development agreement. And the Planning and Zoning Board, did say that they recommend the council to approve the development agreement to limit it to just this indoor self-storage facility with the restrictions. And there was actually some wording, like I said, that, in the conclusion of the web version of the staff report we added and we talked about, but that's already been included in this development agreement. And I think that's it. So, Councilmember Frampus, did you have a question for me?
Just the question that I already asked. Would the developer add to the development agreement that if you back up to the picture showing the roadway, Norfolk Parkway, the other, keep going back.
Okay. Want me to go here?
Right there. This stretch, the northbound area along Norfolk Parkway, would they be willing to put in a development agreement that they won't be seeking access on the Norfolk Parkway? I know the city's investing quite a bit of money on trying to fix some of the problems on Norfolk Parkway, and we already know that it's just a Band-Aid for, you know, the future of when we make that 4 lanes, and I don't want to complicate matters anymore. And I was just wondering if the developer is willing to stick with the plan they have here and willing to add that into the agreement.
It's something that we could consider. I don't know that it's entirely necessary, as I think that you're stating it, because you know, we don't have the ability or the choice without permission from the landowner, and or would have to apply for any permits that might or might not be brought back to you in order to gain approval to have that access happen. So there's already limiting factors that are already in place.
But if we stated in the agreement, we know for a fact that it won't happen. So is that something you're not willing to do?
I'd have to discuss it with, I need a minute to talk to council about it and see what type of limiting factors that it would have in the event that it came up at a later date. That
Okay, because I wouldn't be willing to support this at all if that wasn't in the agreement, and I don't need to talk about it anymore. Thank you.
I'll make the comment. I kind of like the curb cut there. Norfolk Parkway is a public road, not a Sawgrass road, because someday Norfolk Parkway, as you know, will go all the way to St. John's Heritage Parkway. I think this is going to end up being one of the busiest intersections in our city, if not the county, eventually, with the traffic movement here.
Which we don't want people crossing over the road and creating a traffic problem, even more so getting out on the Norfolk. I mean, that's part of the problem we have. There's too much traffic there. And like you said, it's going to be the most busiest intersection we have. Why would we want to add to that problem?
Well, as I see it, everybody can only turn out of this subdivision and head south. So if they need to make a U-turn, for instance, that's the only way they're going to head back north. You got the trucks, they're going to have to cross the turn lane, 2 lanes going south, and then you got the far lane. And that I can tell by this picture, even though it's not 100% the scale, that's a lot of movement for a vehicle, truck or car, to get all the way to the east part of that road and make the U-turn just to head back north. So if they could get out on the main Norfolk Parkway, it might change things. So to me, that's a big deal. Where is and anybody heading obviously north on Minton Road has to make a U-turn to get in here. Where is that intersection for the first curb cut to do that?
Well, let's see if it shows up on the aerial. I'm not sure if it shows up on the aerial. Remember that the future land use in the rezoning request is just for the industrial portion, and so the development agreement, it does show this without the curb cut. Just to clarify something Mr. Masson says, that, you know, he said that the permits and whatnot would have to go through the city, and that's correct. The city council doesn't review, you know, curb cuts and driveway cuts, et cetera. That would be reviewed at the staff level because Norfolk Parkway is a city road. But he's absolutely correct in that, you know, before the city allows that curb cut, obviously the property owner, D.R. Horton, of that tract would have to give their approval to allow their access through that. And so that would be probably an easement sort of document to allow that passage.
However they do it, they do it. But
just to clarify, that's not just 1, 2, 3. That would involve a few.
But when they bring these things piecemeal to us, like the self-storage, they build that and then they come back later for the second half of that, it's already laid out, the driveway cuts and everything, and how things have to be laid out. So I got to look at the big picture. That corner will obviously have restaurants, bars, other things there. And that'll be a pretty popular place, everybody heading south to Palm Bay. But again, everybody that's coming in there has to get back on Minton, and we need to keep cars off of Minton because it's already overcrowded. So even if they left there and made a right turn only out of their development on North Fork Parkway, again, it's not going to happen the next few years, but North Fork Parkway will connect to St. John's. We all know that. It's laid out that way. Like it or not, the traffic's going to be there, and that will connect. So we got what's best for the big picture here.
So just to answer your other question, I mean, you can't really see it at this image, but your question about, a vehicle that's traveling northbound, where are they going to make their U-turn in order to double back and come to this property legally? That would be at the carriage gate area. And that's where they would have to make their U-turn to come back.
That's the worst place.
If they cut through lanes and whatnot, or travel over the curb cut, that's why I use the word legally. That's where the legal access would be.
Yes. And that's what we have to go by. So to me, that seems like more of an issue, because we already know how bad it is getting out of Carriage Gate in that 54, used to be 55 housing there that will use it, and plus whatever else goes in that church or whatever goes there. That's going to be an awful busy U-turn coming off of the hump of 95. So I think they need another curb cut to get in and out of that development. Mr. Bentley?
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, I think the mayor kind of touched on it. I was just curious, if you're heading south on Minton and you want to go north and you're pulling out of this gentleman's proposed facility, where's your first opportunity to make that U-turn? Or do we allow on Norfolk U-turns?
Yeah, I believe they would be able to. Mr. Morgan, unless something with the new design would prohibit that, I would think that's the way that they were going to be able to make their U-turn going southbound.
Yeah, so we allow U-turns at Norfolk to go north on Minton.
And I think what some of the council questions has been sort of this weave, right? You're leaving a development and it's a short distance, and so it's possible under a lot of traffic conditions you'd have to continue south till you get to
Palm Bay Road.
I think it's Heald.
Heald Road.
Okay. So that was my first question, and my second one was to Mr. Frampus a little bit. I hate this idea of putting something on there long term, but what would your thoughts be if they agreed not to do an access, and I'm just making this up on the fly, onto Norfolk Parkway until such time that Parkway is 4-laned, or Norfolk's 4-laned?
I don't like it.
I understand. I'm just asking Mr. Frampus.
I don't know what the rules are for crossing 2 lanes of traffic. I don't know if there are any.
It's bad.
I just know that we have problems there now, and we're trying to fix them. We're spending a lot of money to fix them. And by adding this in, maybe this isn't the best place for this particular type of business then, if it's such a problem. I don't know.
Regardless of whether it's this use or another, I mean, it has the designation of commercial. Somebody's going to be battling how they get in and out of the property.
Well, I do believe that a storage facility probably has the least number of trips of anything I can almost think of. So from that perspective, I would say this is your best game in town from that perspective. But we do have a problem.
I was saying that using the entrance off of Minton would be fine, and we don't have to do a curb cut into Norfolk where we're already having issues.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand the U-turn, and it sounds like we can make a U-turn currently. I don't know how you get over there, but you could try at Norfolk, and in the worst case, you go to Heald.
Well, there's a few streets in between the Ellis and the Sharon, but yeah, in order to make the full U-turn with, let's say that it is some sort of big vehicle, I don't know that you guys have done the study to see how many, true house size types of vehicles would go into your facility if you only have 300 square foot units that are in there?
We believe that most of the traffic is going to be people in passenger vehicles and SUVs. I mean, we really don't expect to see people coming in with, we
can't hear you.
We expect that most of the business and most of the people will be in their passenger vehicles and SUVs. We really expect very little traffic of people that are actually like moving, This is really expected and intended to be an extension of somebody's home. Most of these units are I like to reference them as lockers. Folks that maybe now have an electric car and they need to put it in the garage to plug it in, and they need some place to put their Christmas gear and their seasonal items like fishing poles and surfboards and stuff. And they're going to rent 10 by 10 units that they're just honestly going to have forever. We don't expect it to be a transient at all. That's one of the reasons why once these fill up, they have such a low traffic count. I mean, it's there to keep, grandma's stuff and the other mentioned things.
You don't allow automobiles to be stored in there?
There'll be no automobiles, no. I mean, there'll be no automobiles, there'll be no mailboxes, there'll be no place to get mail, no ability to get a business license. I mean, these are storage lockers, indoor storage lockers, and you'll drive your vehicle inside the building to unload, to, bring your surfboard upstairs. A thought that I have, not a well thought out thought, and I'd like to certainly not lose Mr. Frampus's support, is perhaps we could add some language to the development agreement that in the event that there's an opportunity to gain access on the Norfolk that we have no intention of doing, but I don't want to give up the complete right to permanently, maybe we could add language that that item would have to be brought back to council and be at the wish of council, and if it made sense.
But once you build this on that site, with knowing that commercial is going to be in front, it blocks a lot of movement, frankly, where you could move that turn further west. So it changes everything, putting the storage unit where it is. We've got to keep in mind whatever retail is going up front. There will be trucks, there will be deliveries.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah, so it's all part of the same picture here.
Well, certainly we're discussing something that isn't even possible now, and I don't know that it ever will be. I mean, someday, like you said, the road will be 4-laned. It will hopefully be connected to Heritage Parkway sooner than later. We all know that we'd like to have that type of relief in the traffic congestion.
The 4-lane is so far off because we don't even have 2 lanes right now to go through, so I'm not worried about the 4 lanes quite yet. Yep. Hopefully when they do the 4 lanes, they'll give us easement to do all that all the way through, but the bridge and everything, there's a lot to consider before we talk about that, I would think. Mr. Ditmore?
Wow. Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to disagree with Mr. Frampus on this, and I'll explain why. If I lived, if I lived in Sawgrass, I would not want to have to go out on the Minton Road to turn right on Norfolk and fight through that traffic in that intersection just to get back home. I would like to be able to come out on Norfolk Parkway and just go right up the street, because I think that storage unit will probably be used by a lot of people that live back there, I would imagine. And just to the young lady that was up here speaking about having access to the restaurant, if they want to be able to come and go to the restaurant, it'd be nice if they didn't have to come down and try to go up Minton, try to find a U-turn to come back down south. It'd be nice if they could just come down, turn in, and go inside. As far as crossing over 2 lanes of traffic, we have that everywhere that I can think of, all over the place. Derry, if you go down Derry trying to make turns, I know there's several of those where they have those left-hand turns. I think it would be very convenient for the people that live there. If you make it a right turn only, I'm not saying we have to put this in an agreement, but I'm just thinking out loud. A right turn out exit coming on the Norfolk Parkway, and that will allow people to come in, and then no left turns trying to turn left so you can go south on Minton, and just force the southbound traffic on Minton out on the Minton side. I think it kind of solves that problem, and it gives easy access for the people who live back there to be able to get in and out as they need to. I would hate to see them having to drive all the way down to the intersection, turn left on Minton, go up to Carriage Gate, do a U-turn to try to come back. I think that would be kind of counterproductive, and I think it solves. I mean, we'll reduce the load of traffic on Minton, by allowing people that live back in Sawgrass to, if they use this facility or use these restaurants or whatever in the future, to go out the back and to head westbound on Norfolk Parkway. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Young?
While we're talking about traffic lanes, on the concept drawing, there is this nice right turn lane next to Minton. Are you putting that improvement in, or is that just part of the concept?
Already there.
It's just part of the concept. They haven't gone through their traffic study yet, and a lot of that's going to be dictated by the county with that commercial development and the industrial. So, no, that's
part of the picture.
Not baked into the development agreement yet.
Well, we believe that there's going to be a need to have a turning lane put in, but it hasn't been engineered because, you know, at this point, we're not there yet. So.
When the commercial goes in, but not for your industrial.
Oh, no, we intend to, do the site work. The overall project will get built and the storage facility will get constructed first and until we find users for the 2 parcels out front. So all of the off-sites and the better part of the common landscaping, the interior road, all of that will be constructed at the same time. It's not just going to be the back port.
Okay, then let me interrupt and let him know, and Mr. Cole, Oliver in the audience, that involves another process, which is perfect. It's the planned commercial and the planned industrial development process that goes to the city's Board of Adjustment, and that's where a lot of the particulars about the layout are going to be, fine-tuned, and that's where we'll have some feedback from some of the other agencies, a question about the retention and whatnot. That will be probably about 30 to 50% engineering drawings, so not this, which is about 10% maybe engineering drawings, if that. And that would answer some of that, but so that the audience here, those are public hearing processes too. Board of Adjustment is not City Council. Board of Adjustment's its own board, but it would be a notice advertised, just like this, public hearing, and then there could be lots of, comments and questions added about the exact layout.
Thank you.
Christie?
Mr. Ditmore?
Just one quick question for the development agreement. Are gas stations and car washes off the list here?
They're not allowed in the light industrial zoning district, so.
So the front commercial though?
Well, it's not off the list there because this development agreement is not addressing the commercial. It's only addressing this industrial portion.
So I just want to just kind of make it kind of clear where I feel about that right now. I think if later down the road, I think car washes are going to add trips, lots of traffic, and gas stations is not the kind of the right look. I mean, that's something I would not be in favor of. So, okay, thank you.
And just to be clear, again, we're showing 2 halves, but the 2 halves have to equal a whole. They're developing the whole property. Maybe that entryway should be further north, should be this way or that way, further away from the intersection. I know this is conceptual and it doesn't mean a whole lot, but just once you build a self-storage back there, it dictates kind of the rest of the layout, how they're doing retention and all that's figured in ahead of time. So again, if you're going to exit on North Fork Parkway or do any curb cuts there, you can't have that curb cut too close to the intersection either. So there's a lot of different ways that could be configured. Maybe the entry will be behind the self-storage and an access road back there where the retention pond is. So I don't know. I can't tell a number of how many feet and all those kind of things from this picture, but.
Can you bring up the other slide that shows just the site plan? And, there is minimum restrictions on how close you could put the curb cut to get in before you get to the light. I don't know what those are off the top of my head. This one probably gives a more accurate idea because this was basically just a color rendition of our conceptual site plan done by our civil engineer. And so this is, as far as access off of Mitten Road, what we anticipate being the 2 access points, the one to the furthest north and the one in the middle.
Okay.
And that's it.
But again, you look at the indoor storage locker facility, 3 stories. If there is a curb cut on North Fork Parkway, whether required or not, you can't, you don't even know, you said how far that could be from the intersection, so maybe that building would need to be reconfigured to have that access further from the intersection.
I mean, I see your point, but we still have back to the, you know, the westernmost property line behind the building, you know, if that opportunity ever presented itself.
I don't know how much room is there. There's not much, it looks like there.
It's a couple hundred feet. I mean, the building is over 200 feet from Mitten Road. So, I mean, it's a pretty deep piece of property. I think the property is 600 feet deep.
Are you talking on the western part behind the indoor?
No, I'm talking about from Mitten Road.
He's talking along the eastern property line. If you took a tape measure from that eastern property line to the front of that indoor locker, that's where he's talking about the 200 feet of distance.
That's correct. And I think that's in our development agreement that requires the building to be a minimum of, I think it was 200 feet, actually.
Right.
So I would have to scale it, but I'm pretty sure we're further back than that.
Again, I don't know how, if the curb cut on North Fork Parkway came into being, is that far enough from the intersection to be legal, is the question.
A curb cut onto Norfolk Parkway from this property, the way the code describes it, I believe it's about 50 feet from that hard intersection. So that's not much. You know, but in terms of the way that they design it, that's where it would probably end up being set further back than that if there was to be some sort of curb cut through that tract LD1 onto Norfolk Parkway.
Yeah, I would lean into that curb cut before I can move on. That's my comment. Mr. Frampus, your hand's up.
Thank you, Mayor. The right turn lane that Andrea was talking about, that's the existing right turn lane that's already there, correct?
That's right. There is a right turn lane. The question really becomes, what else do they have to do? How far back? Does the county need them to do something else in terms of its width, not just how far back? So those are the questions that, yeah, we don't have those engineer questions answered yet.
Right. And I had a question on the notification that was made to the association. Who did that go to? Because as president, I didn't get any notification on this to give to my residents, and that's probably why only one of the residents showed up tonight. I was just curious of where that went. So
I could provide that report on the second reading. I don't have the file in front of me, but I could certainly provide that update.
Okay, so we might have a different turnout the next time this is brought up. I had a couple other statements I wanted to put out about what was in the packet. It was talked about the closed landfill designated to become vehicle storage lot to the west. It didn't state in there that there was a large opposition from the community against that project. I just wanted to say that there was about 600 to 800 the residents, probably more like 600 of the residents were opposed to that project. So there was some opposition there. We also talk about the comprehensive plan a lot in this thing. It talks about traffic improvements are not part of the process. And then it says, but, and then that goes to list all the positives about the traffic. So it seems we're not allowed to consider traffic things, but we're allowed to put it in there if it sounds good. We talk about the city discourages pockets of unrelated land use, but, so we have a lot of buts here. It talks about no industrial zoning currently exists, but, you know, it just seems like we twist and turn our comp plan to make these things to fit. I look at the conceptual drawing, and to me it looks like a warehouse, and we're in the midst of about 2,000 residents when all the apartment places get built. And if this is going to happen, I would like to see something a more resident friendly look to it than a bunch of square buildings that look like just warehouse units. So if this is going to go through, I would like to see something that's more friendly to the residents around the neighborhood. Thank you.
Mr. Bentley?
Yeah, Christy, can you put the other picture up of the warehouse where you could see? You just had it up there a few minutes ago. No? Yes. I want to make sure I understand, Mary, your point is if you look at Minton Road and head west, if you could have a cutout, where would it fall on this picture? Where earlier's portion, right? Do you know that answer, Christy? I don't know what the distance between Minton Road red light and a cutout would be allowed. Does that make sense? So
Well,
and I think that's what the mayor's asking.
You've got whatever the width is of that tract LD1, and at that point, it may be 25 feet, and then you have the right-of-way for Norfolk Parkway. So I don't remember if tract LD1 sort of ends where that, the fake little landscape.
If you could put your finger on Norfolk Parkway here and show me, or the mouse, that's great. Go left and show me where legally the earliest point you could put a cutout.
Yeah, I'm going to guess. I mean, it's going to be somewhere in here, but as Mr. Masson said,
I was thinking you were thinking it was somewhere around here, Mayor.
I would like it left of the indoor storage, far away from the intersection as you can get. If not.
Legally, to answer your question, I think it can be way up here. It doesn't have to be way back here.
Could be.
Right.
But again, that means that it's, potentially only right in, right out, because there's still some traffic considerations there for how that's designed. So even though it would be a curb cut, there's a difference between sort of a curb cut and a full access curb cut. So if that's what the mayor's talking about, then yes, that would probably be further back if our new design of Norfolk Parkway would allow a full access.
We know there's a median in the road there, and,
So if that's what you're asking, Mayor, for full access, I don't know that they would be able to have one.
Yeah, I don't either, but we're all spitballing, and I'd like to kind of know some answers before I give them permission to move forward.
Can I just clarify for a second? Because I want to make sure that I understand your point. Is we're talking about a piece of property that we have no control of, that we have no intention of buying, and I've already previously spoke to the owner multiple times and are not willing to grant access. So we're discussing an opportunity that might present itself in the future. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not sure that they won't grant access. They won't give it for free, I'm sure.
We've tried to buy the property. We've offered them. There might be a mechanism in the future that maybe creates that opportunity, but it doesn't exist now. And it's not even a consideration. But, we could certainly agree to have the site engineered in a manner so it allows, access if it's ever available, to make sure that I think I understood your point earlier, is that there's enough distance between the building and maybe perhaps, allow for the pervious area to, exist in the design, so that if there ever is an opportunity that we could cross that D.R. Horton-owned piece of property to gain access onto Norfolk Parkway, it could be considered. I think it's a good idea to design the site with that future intent.
Yeah, and that's
obviously
true.
you've been trying to do that. You're saying, talk to them many times, so you know the need for it as well. But just because they won't allow it today, I think you have to try harder to do that and figure out what that number is that makes it work. They don't love that piece of property.
And I agree with you completely. It's something that should be planned for. It's just something we don't have the ability to do now, but it should be taken into consideration in the civil engineering. I'm certainly willing to make that a condition that, a future access point be designed, at the time that the property is fully engineered.
But once you build that building, it might limit a lot of that movement.
Well, we can make sure it doesn't.
Yeah, that's true, because what I was going to point out was with Palm Garden Lakes, I don't know how many of you all go from Minton Road into the gate there, but right before the gate, there's like a little curb cut that we made them put in for the property to the north, so that there could be that joint access to it. So that's certainly something we could do.
We could add it to the development agreement as a condition.
Mr. Frampus?
I would like to say that if that's the case and that's something you're going to force into the development agreement, that northwest corner right there at the bottom, if Christy can use her pointer, in that grassy area, I believe you guys were thinking about putting a dog park there at one time. So I'm sorry, it'd be the southwest corner, the grassy area.
Just for clarification, who was going to put a dog park there?
And where's the pointer?
One of their plans had a dog park in that area.
That's correct. We did have
Okay, I wasn't aware
a
of that.
conceptual design of that green area in the.
This area here?
Yes, right there.
Okay.
And we were trying to, we did have a conceptual of that. We were hoping that might motivate being able to gain access to Norfolk Parkway at the time when we thought the homeowners association had control of that property. So we thought maybe that would be, helpful, and also, a compromise or as such. But, we now know that D.R. Horton owns that property, and offering them a dog park, I don't think is going to get access.
My point was that I realize the dog park's not there right now. If the council is wanting this curb cut, that would be my suggestion, that it's further west down Norfolk, which will interfere with less of the traffic backup, and you could have your entranceway into that area and then go, east alongside your property for access. Is that something possible?
We would be in agreement with that.
Because that seems to be what the mayor and somebody are then. I would prefer to see it more west than closer to Minton, for sure.
I'd like to see that as done before we move on, not conceptually, because you can say, D.R. Horton, I'm going to give you $5, and they say no, and you say we can't do it. So I would like that as part of the agreement, that's part of the plan to actually construct and do that. Because I think it's a bad omen to have just one entry access. Maybe you have two conceptually here.
And that's
on the
up to
Minton.
the county, what they decide to grant in terms of Minton Road, whether they give one access or two.
But again, everything is heading south, makes it dangerous to make, everybody's going to have to make U-turns to head the other direction, dropping your child off, or going to the Shooter's Pub or
Whatever
something.
the use may be, you're correct. That's the way the property's set up right now.
But as the developer stated, they don't own that property, so they can't agree to that. So if they put it in a development agreement that if it becomes available, that's where they would put it, then it sounds like that's what they would do. So, I mean.
And furthermore, we would also engineer it and build it at the time of construction
Right.
to allow for that.
Like
So that it's
Garden Lakes did. They did a curb so that you don't have the raised curb at that point. It's just flush. So that's what I mean by it could be designed and sort of baked into that. But whether they would legally have access through somebody else's property, that's the part that he's right, that I haven't heard that they have that yet.
No, we don't. I mean, we've been shut down multiple times, and we did offer a substantial amount of money to buy the property.
Obviously not enough. I mean, I don't know, that's between you guys, but.
There were reasons that were given to me that wouldn't be appropriate to I think they have a bargaining chip for future. I mean, I think that someday there will be an opportunity that council will have to negotiate that access on behalf of the site, and we'll be prepared to construct it when that happens.
I know the indoor facility with all the stipulations, seems like a decent fit, not optimum fit, but as far as traffic. But the part we're not knowing is what can go in the front of there, gas stations, whatever, et cetera,
Be happy to-
storage, all the different restaurants, fast food, you name it, it can go there, and it will be a lot of traffic going in one direction.
Hi, Cole Oliver with the landowner. And Mayor, you're right, we don't know what's going to go there, but we do know that it's going to be limited to what's already allowable there now. And by switching the back to this use that the council knows exactly what it's going to be, we're reducing the traffic counts by, I believe it's 10% of what is potentially on that parcel. And though we don't have legal access, as the developer has stated, they're willing to build it out and put it there in the event that that legal access does become available. And they have pursued it. I've been part of those negotiations. And sometimes you have a seller who's just, for other reasons that have nothing to do with this project, but maybe something they have coming in the future, doesn't want to work with anyone at this time. And, you know, the landowner has currently the full property zoned as C2, and we're asking for this limited use that will bring down the traffic in the future trips in and out on Minton, which everyone's justifiably concerned about. And, you know, so with respect to the not knowing what's going there, we don't know what's going there if this is not approved. But what council has the opportunity tonight is to choose what's going to go on at least a portion of it, and that choice will be the lowest possible traffic count in the FDOT handbook.
Just for the record, it's on C1, not C2.
Apologies. Yeah. The red one.
Yeah. No car lots in C1 like that, yeah. All right, this is still part of the public hearing. Does anybody else from the public wish to address City Council? And then we'll close the public hearing. City Council, what are your wishes? Does anybody care to make a motion? First reading only. Mr. Bachelor?
Cowards. Right. I make a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance number 2022-05, small-scale comprehensive plan amendment, case number, case SSA 2022-03, to change the future land use on 6.29 acres of property located at 320 feet west of Minton Road. At the northwest corner of Minton Road and Norfolk Parkway, the remaining portion of the properties along the frontage of Minton Road will remain COM commercial.
Thank you, Mr. McDowell.
Second that.
Okay. That was easy. Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Mr. Bachelor, you have any comments?
No, I think I broke the light.
Okay. You've been using it so much lately, I've noticed. Mr. City Attorney, so with the promise of them looking to perhaps maybe in the future, it doesn't give me a lot of confidence. So short of a development agreement that it must be built into this project, not just a possible curb cut, what can be done to assure that? Because without that, I don't like the project moving forward, even though I conceptually like the project itself. Again, traffic is the big concern here, and the U-turns, and especially the intersections, both intersections that they have to make U-turns are incredibly busy now. So is there a mechanism to get what I want?
No, I don't think you should feel very confident at all about that because they have absolutely no control over that as it stands right now. And as you said, it's a promise to do something in the future if an opportunity arises. So there are no guarantees.
But I'm just asking, isn't it currently could be worse?
Absolutely.
Than allowing this?
Absolutely.
So this at least guarantees the lowest possible traffic that I think you can get.
Yes.
Whereas if you leave things alone, as some may be suggesting, it could all go the way of something else and be more.
On paper, the current comprehensive plan and zoning allows for much more traffic than would be allowed under the proposal or generate under the
Not
proposal.
just that the industrial in and of itself allows less, it's that by having the development agreement where you're specifying the dead storage use,
Exactly.
I mean, you virtually eliminate the type of traffic you could have open-ended, not doing any motion on any of the items tonight.
So it becomes sort of a gamble. If you don't approve it, will the property remain vacant or will it develop with a high traffic commercial use? And that's hard to say. Ms. Fisher, do you know off the top of your head the property to the north, what the zoning of that is?
Yeah, that's the one that has a mixture of the, I need to go to the other one, Morris, to be able to show them, but that's the one that has most of it zoned institutional for
Okay.
Seventh-day Adventist. There had been some people asking us about Seventh-day Adventist was thinking of selling that and having an assisted living facility. So that's where, there was that question, I believe, from Councilmember Young about this gray area.
Right.
So the gray area is Seventh-day Adventist. They also have some commercial out front. They have this little bit of residential in the back, but that's over a wetland. But they had thought about putting in, when they did their big church, they were going to have bookstore and maybe restaurant out here. So there's all kinds of proposals that could happen.
There's no single family zone immediately adjacent. That would, if there were, that would eliminate the possibility in the C1 district for a service station. But because there isn't, that is a possible conditional use there. Because you're just outside of the town center overlay, which stops at the interstate overpass. So it's far enough south that, yes, that's a theoretical use on that property.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I will recommend, though, if we're going to, even the sort of nebulous promise that you described about access to Norfolk, if that ever becomes available, will require a little rewriting of the development agreement. And I did want to point out before anyone makes a motion with regard to the development agreement that we had the zoning meeting Wednesday night. There were some recommendations for some changes to that agreement. I was out of the office on Thursday entirely before the packet was put together. Ms. Fisher and her staff did a great effort of capturing those revisions. I have noticed a few minor things in the development agreement, renumbering, scrivener's errors, things like that. So I was going to suggest that either A, if you do want to make a motion on the development agreement, assuming comp plan and zoning passes first, because that'd be the correct order here, make it with the caveat that city attorney approves with changes, non-substantive changes, or because this is first reading of the two ordinances and the development agreement is a one-shot deal, you could always consider the development agreement, direct us to make revisions to the development agreement and bring that back at the same time as second reading of the two ordinances.
All right. And again, is Mr. Ditmore voting on all three of these or just the first one? Or?
All three.
I think I'm voting all three, correct, Mr. Richardson? He asked, the mayor is asking if I'm voting on all three.
You're allowed to.
If I'm allowed to.
Yeah, yes, you absolutely are. Yeah.
We said you must on the first, but yes.
He absolutely must on the comp plan when the other two, theoretically could, but I don't think it even creates an appearance of.
Right. All right. So I'll support this first reading, and then the second one we'll have to do some thinking and see what they kind of bring back also. All right. So we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Bachelor, second from Mr. McDowell. All those in favor, signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Nay.
Motion passes 6-1 with Deputy Mayor Young voting nay.
Yeah, no, he voted aye.
Mr. Frampton, you voted aye. Is that correct?
I did, as long as they make the changes to the development agreement.
Yeah. Well, we heard your aye, and we haven't got a development agreement yet.
I know.
The ayes have it on that
Vote
one.
next one.
The second, let me see, get my pages right here. And the second part,
Is the rezoning.
rezoning, do we have a motion for that one? For the first reading only? There's no lights on. Yeah. Mr. Bachelor, you're up.
I make a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance number 2022-06, rezoning 6.29 acres of the 9.69 acre property case REZ 2022-03, located at the northwest corner of Minton Road, Norfolk Parkway, from C1 low density commercial to M1 light industrial and warehousing. The remainder of the property along the frontage of Minton Road will remain C1.
Thank you for all that. Mr. Ditmore?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? Motion carries 6-1 with Deputy Mayor voting nay. And as suggested, the developers agreement to be brought back on second reading. Do we need a motion for that?
Yes, I would make a motion to table that one to the next meeting at the same time as second reading of the two ordinances.
Mr. Ditmore? Second Rose. Any discussion? Mr. Frampus?
Yeah, I would also like to maybe consider, it looks like all the trees and vegetation that they're talking about putting along Norfolk is what already exists there. So I was wondering if we could
No.
have some kind of,
No, and that's not correct. In the development agreement, we talk about the buffer. It's just their image doesn't show what the development agreement requirements are. So that's not a true depiction of what the buffer is going to look like.
so what is the buffer?
The buffer, it's kind of like with the engineering. They haven't engaged a landscape architect yet to meet the terms of that buffer. If you want there to be sort of a cross-section of what that could be, I'd like to entertain that. But no, I don't want them guessing at what that's going to be in a conceptual drawing. That needs to be drawn by a landscape architect when they submit the civil engineer drawings.
Councilmember Frampus, if you look to page 4 and 5 of the development agreement at 10E13 and 10E14 of the packet, the development agreement provides for either a solid wall wood fence or other 100% opaque materials or a type C landscape buffer, minimum 15-foot wide landscape area, and it calls for it calls out specified larger landscape, including 2 to 3 large trees, 2 to 3 small trees, 6 to 8 understory trees, and 40 to 55 shrubs in a stacked pattern for each 100 feet. So it's pretty specific in the development agreement, and it is a pretty intense landscape buffer if they go that route.
so when we talk about fencing, we're talking about an 8-foot fence? Is that what we're talking about? Because the building's 35 feet tall, so I'm not thinking an 8-foot fence is going to block very much. So that's why I was thinking the large trees and things would be a better fit.
Right, but this is the same discussion I had with the Planning and Zoning Board, that I know most people are thinking ground level, what is the fence going to look like? But the way that our code defines these types of fences, it's not measured at the ground level at that particular property point, but it's measured at whatever the elevation is of the closest parking lot. So if that parking lot is 3 or 4 feet higher than where they're thinking of putting the fence, then guess what? That's where that 6-foot point begins. And I don't care if they put a berm there. I don't care if they put 3 or 4 feet of regular fence underneath that. Before they reach the 6 or 8 foot, that's what they have to do. So it's not what you're thinking. It's going to be whatever they need to in order to make that height as it's measured at the parking lot and not at that ground level.
And Mr. Richardson, the changes to the development agreement are going to reflect the possible cutout and the installation of that when it becomes, or if it becomes available?
Yes, you can't see it, but the developer's attorney and I are nodding at each other. I think we have direction on that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yeah. We didn't call it, did we call this table or just, okay. All right, we do have that, right? Who made them?
We made a motion to table it.
Yes,
We have to vote on it.
yes, we do. I had to make sure everybody had it. Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right. Thank you. Our last action item is to postpone the amended tree preservation and landscaping requirements so they can make some final changes.
For City Council to make a motion to postpone that item. So if you could make that motion, please.
Mr. Ditmore?
I make a motion to postpone. Sorry, I just disappeared on my
May
electronic screen here.
Until May 17th.
Until May 17th. Okay.
Mr. McDowell? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next up, we have the public forum. Do we have any speaker cards, Mr.? Thank you. After that, we have the consent agenda. Mr. Ditmore?
Make a motion to pass the consent agenda.
Mr. Bentley? Second. Okay, all those in favor, pass the consent agenda as presented, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next, which y'all been waiting for, is the annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2021.
Just kidding. Coffee.
I'd like to protest the crimson cover with the white binder.
Roll Tide.
Oh my God, I hope we're not going page by page, are we? Stop it. We've all read it.
Go by the way.
The CAFR, man, it's done.
Christian, can you take over sharing?
Thank you. I'm sorry it's late, but I get up here like once a year, so I'm going to go through my little PowerPoint really quickly. And
All 151 pages.
yes. And then we're going to read verbatim.
We hear a motion to accept.
And you guys
with
can
you.
vote to, 8:30 would be better for me than 10:30, but okay.
You may come tomorrow.
We're a little late this year with our report, like a month. We were waiting for the OPEB actuarial report, but here we go. This is our Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Finance reporting for last year's financial report. And after you accept the audited financial statements, we will be preparing to send this to the Government Finance Officers Association for another award for next year. Simple overview, they were also in the staff report. The fund balance of the general fund increased $2.3 million to a total of 16.2. 7.8 is unassigned. In the graph that I emailed out last week, Mr. Bentley's request in the fiscal year 2018 went down, and there were a lot of capital expenditures that year, but positive growth for the last 3 years has brought the unassigned fund balance back up. And this also is in the staff report. It shows the last 3 years of the general fund net changes in fund balance. 1.3, 1.6, and then this year was 2.3. Net position of the water sewer fund increased almost $5 million. 3.5 of that were connection fees and capital contributions from developers. The CRA had a positive year-end fund balance of almost $1 million, and recreation special revenue, the Fund 103 that Mr. Morgan was talking about before, has ending fund balance of excess of $900,000, which would be able to fund some park improvements. Stormwater Utility Fund, which had a negative fund balance for the past few years based on property purchases and equipment purchases. We went positive this year after excess revenues of $400,000. The Police Pension Trust Fund, and I think I had a wording boo-boo in my staff report. It was a net pension asset of $1.7 million. And the planned fiduciary net position was 109%. I think I called it net pension liability.
Either way, 109% is super.
It's unheard of for local plans. Before I introduce the partner that's in charge of our audit this year, Debbie Good, I would like to, because I don't get up here very often, I would like to thank the finance department. I would like to thank, in particular, Sonia Banks, who's in the audience tonight. She's taken a leading role in dealing with the auditors over the past couple of years, and I much appreciate that. And I will also tell you that I might call us sometimes the Dirty Dozen, but if you'd been to City Hall in the past month or so and saw the flood and the unavailable customer service area downstairs, when the finance people had to move upstairs and they crammed in the little executive conference room and they were loaded up behind Deanne, no one said a peep. I am very grateful for the staff of the finance department. Without them, my job would be not so great. And when things are going wrong or they're tough, it's kind of like a family. Get on each other's nerves every once in a while, but when times get tough, everybody pitches in and everything gets done, and for that I will be eternally grateful. So without further ado, Debbie, please come up and talk about our audit.
Thank you, Ms. Starkey.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Margie said, I'm Debbie Good. I'm an audit partner and the partner in charge of Carr, Riggs & Ingram's Melbourne office. Margie did a great job presenting. I just want to point out a few things to you as your auditor. The report that we issued was a clean opinion, so everything was accurately stated in accordance with government auditing standards in all material respects. As Margie said, the general fund had about a $7.8 million of unassigned fund balance. And sometimes I get the question, well, what does that mean? How are we doing? And a good way to look at that is you should have about 3 to 6 months in your unassigned fund balance. Some people would say 3 months. I say 6 months because Florida, we know when hurricanes come and all those things, sometimes we have to use our available monies. And that is a minimum amount you'd want to have. Sometimes you want to have money in your unassigned fund balance because of future projects that you know you're going to want to do. You want to set money aside. We all know that this economy is, it's interesting, but it's good, but we don't know when it might turn or what's going to happen in the future. So you currently have, if I take your total expenditures minus your capital outlay, this past year they were about $12 million. So 3 to 6 months would be $3 to $6 million, and you are at 7.8. So certainly you have money there, and again, that is a minimum amount, and I never tell anybody what that should be because I don't know what all the future things are that you have planned. But I do want you to know, and the citizens to know, that you're in good financial condition. I think that's important. The pension fund, as Margie mentioned, 109.04%. There is a chart in the financial statements that shows how that has been increasing over time. That is excellent. And I remember the days not too long ago when the stock market wasn't going in the right direction. And I saw those numbers going down, down, down. And some people were not well funded to start with. And so the down, down, down really was bad. So, I mean, our market's been doing good. Again, we don't know where it's going to go, but you are in a good position right now with the police pension plan. In the back of the report, you'll see our report on internal controls and compliance with laws and regulations. That, again, was a clean report. We had no findings. And we like to think of ourselves as tough auditors. So we do every year come in and look at your internal controls, and we do what we call a walkthrough to make sure controls that they tell us are in place are really there, that we can see evidence that they're occurring. With COVID and everything, I mean, we're coming out of that, but we saw in other entities where controls did not stay in place. I am happy to report your controls are very good here, and they have been in place. So we had no findings. Also, in compliance with laws and regulations, in that internal control report, those are material compliance and laws and regulations. We had no findings of that nature. There's another letter that we issue. It's your management letter, which is required by the rules of the Auditor General of the state of Florida. We look at the financial condition. As I said, your financial condition is good. We look at some other things, and we report in there, and everything is clean. There is one comment in here. You've seen it before. This is year 3 that we've reported on the building fund having the excess funds. And I will tell you that that will this year, most likely, because it's required, there will be a letter that will come out by JLAC, which is the Judicial Legislative Audit Committee of the state. Anytime there's a comment for 3 years, they do issue it. You could argue whether, you know, that you agree with that statute or not, because you have this money there, and some people might say, well, you know, we need that money because we don't know what's going to happen in the economy. But the way the law is written, and that's what we test as auditors, is compliance with that law. So there is excess building money sitting there right now in excess of what the law says that you should have there. So I know that you have plans, and that's written in management's response. And I know you all have talked about it, and that you have plans to build a building, spend down some of those funds. So that is all in this report, and that was really the only comment we have. And again, it was not considered a material compliance issue. It is just in our report.
How much is it excess, Ms. Good? Do you
It was $2.4 million. Mm-hmm. And that's on page 150 of your audit report, in case anybody wants to look at that. And the management response is also in there. We also test for compliance with local government investment policies. Again, no findings there. I issued also a report. The CRA, of course, has a separate financial statement. I also gave you letters, which are our report to governance of things that we are supposed to report. And in that letter, we talk about any audit adjustments. There were no audit adjustments. There was nothing really in that letter that I need to bring to your attention. We do talk about there's certain estimates and statements like depreciation, but those are the same type estimates, the OPEB done by an actuary, things like that. Those are the same estimates that are in your statements every year, and they're, you know, nothing out of the abnormal, but there are some estimates in there, as everybody would have, and so we point those out in that letter. But again, that letter is very clean. There's nothing in there that I feel like I need to point out to you. The only new accounting policy that we mentioned in there was the capitalization threshold went from $2,500 to $5,000 for the year. So there was a change in the capitalization threshold, which is the property, plant, and equipment, you know, which you capitalize versus expense. So I do want to thank Margie and Sonia for their work on this audit and helping us get through it. We would have produced this audit much earlier. We were all ready, except for we did have to wait for the OPEB report, which, you know, comes from the league. They were doing your calculation for you. So I would take any questions.
Mr. McDowell?
I have some questions.
Okay.
Okay. Just real quick, on the page 30, the 200,000 in inventory, what is that inventory? And why is it in there being, it's not really all that substantial?
That would be just inventory that you have in your water and sewer inventory, chemicals, things like that you have in the water and sewer, and water meters. Mm-hmm.
And pipe, we also have some pipe
So they're just water, that's all water and sewer
I was
related.
just curious how we determine what's inventory. So that's a perpetual, we expect.
They do a count at year end, and that is based on cost
I mean,
basis.
we could put a lot of items in inventory, correct? So, anyway.
Yes, but you'd only put things of a material nature. You don't put, like if you had, screws and bolts and things, little things like that, you don't inventory. So they were things of a material nature.
All right, and then on, I noticed that as well on that page 150 because it was open-ended. I was a little surprised because it was, what you just said was it was 3 years and you'd get this report. Well, this is 4 years prior, so it sounds like we've been, why didn't we get a letter last year?
No, we wrote it up in 2019 and 20 and 21. So we're in the 21, so this is 3 years that it's been in this report. The first year, the reason it's numbered to 2019, that's frankly how they follow it. That's what they require us to do, is number it. So it's 2019, 20, and this will be year 3, 2021.
Okay. Then the last question is about I was looking for the discussion on the Rescue Act. That would be in here, correct? There should be dollars that, no, that's this year?
It's going to happen in the next year and the next year. Yes, you have several years to spend it down, and if any one year you hit over 750,000, that will trigger a single audit, which means compliance with federal grant funding requirements, which is a much bigger deal, very detail-oriented in that particular grant.
And we've already passed that threshold this year that we're in now.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we have good tracking on that, on those dollars, so we know where they went, and so I'm not going to worry about it, because I was surprised, like, where is it?
No, you will, obviously, you've passed the threshold, so you will be audited very closely next year on those specific funds and compliance with those laws.
And I was just looking for, like, for example, on page 151, where it says, the city should identify how it intends to reduce the amount of unexpected building. That had me concerned, but it sounds like you've got that, you're satisfied with that, even with that recommendation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We feel like you having a plan in place is really the most important thing. And honestly, what happens when you receive the letter, what I've seen, my experience, and it's been on different things for different clients, is you respond to the letter, frankly, the same way that you've responded here, unless you have new things to add when they come back with the letter to you. And that's all that usually occurs. I don't usually see anything else occurring beyond that, unless it is something that they feel is a major internal control finding or something like that. And then I would imagine they would continue to follow up over years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bentley?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have one question on page 150 and 151. And you already covered it, saying, well, you're going to spend the excess by building a building, and I'm fine with that, and that is our plan. But on page 150, you have a sentence at the end that says, a local government must use any funds in excess of the limitation, which we are, to rebate or reduce fees. It doesn't say you can build a building there. So I didn't know how that copied in there.
Well, and I am not an attorney. I try not to interpret the laws and everything. But if you look, the law is actually very broadly written.
Okay.
So, I would say legal counsel needs to work with you to make sure that that is within the law.
Keeps us out of trouble.
We've had that discussion. It's a building for the building department.
Fine, as long as.
With a fire truck in it.
Just as a reminder, the council did, for many months, reduce the fees, which is one of the two choices under the state statute, and at the recommendation of staff. So you did take action to do that. It's just that action has now ended.
Well, I just want to say I've seen a lot of these reports over the years, and this looks like the best one, and thank you, Finance, and thank you,
Thank you. And also, this is your report. I did not choose the cover. This was your colors that you all chose.
Who chose the color? Who chose the?
Car Riggs and Ingrid's chosen color.
Councilman Bentley likes the cover.
Yeah, roll tide. Yeah.
Mayor, I did have a question.
Oh, that's, yes, go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's okay. You forget me all the time.
Next speaker, please.
With our police pension at 109%, which is awesome, we had chosen to overfund that account, and I think we talked about going back to normal funding. Is it your recommendation that we go back to normal funding, or do you recommend us to continue to overfund that account? And at which point is it too much?
Honestly, as your auditor, I can't be making those kind of management decisions because that is an operational decision. Because if I were to tell you that you should cut it and then, you know, the investments go down, then you would be coming back at me saying, I don't think we should have done that. Really, that is a management decision. Of course, actuaries get involved in this. You hire one to look at this, and then you have the pension board who makes those decisions. So I can't really recommend, in my role as an auditor, the direction you should take on that.
Good answer.
The council direction for the current budget year is to not overfund. That was an action of the council, and last year it was only overfunded by $22,000. There were years to build it to this point where we were over 200,000 overfunding, so we've cut it back considerably as we've hit that point. So it's a great question, and as a policymakers, the council has told city staff to fund it at the actuaries' level.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Ms. Good, we appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Great audit, thank you. Thank y'all. And Scott, of course, I know that you did quite a bit on this audit and the rest of the staff, so please pass on our.
Yeah, I think Margie said it right. I think we have a really top-notch finance department, starting with the management team sitting there. Sonia did a fabulous job. We had good, tough auditors, as was stated, and so it's our recommendation that there's a motion to receive and file the annual comprehensive financial report. It's going to be hard for me to say it that way after 43 years of saying it the way it's on the cover.
Mr. Bentley, would you like to make a motion to accept this colorful document?
With all the colorful language you used, I'll make that motion.
We have a motion. Deputy Mayor?
Second.
Motion is second. Any more discussion?
Yeah, I would also just, in general, you know, the city's financial position each year has gotten better and better and better, at least since Scott's been here. So, you know, just fantastic, really, I think. Thank you, Mayor.
Very good. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Our second action item tonight is employee benefit plan. Oh. All right.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Bear with me just a minute while I get our presentation set up. You probably remember Mr. Dinklage. He's the managing partner from Highland out of the Orlando office.
They do a great job for us.
Yes, they do. He's here to answer any higher level questions that I'm not able to answer. Our amazing IT team already has this pulled up for me, so I'll just grab the mouse. Thank you so much. All right, so Mr. Dinklage and I are here to present to you the group insurance renewal for the 2022-2023 plan year. It's mainly going to focus on medical coverage. For the reason that we have a rate pass or rate hold for all other lines of coverage. Thank you very much. So the vendors that are in place for the HRA FSA, dental, vision, life, disability EAP, and the supplemental plans of health and legal are requested to remain in place due to the fact that there's no changes in benefit structure or premium. So, like I said, the bulk of the presentation and your staff report packet is based on the proposal to change vendors from Health First Health Plans to Cigna. The reason for that is, as you know, Health First Health Plans announced their exit from the group health marketplace. So we were forced to go out for proposals. Hylant put a lot of hard work and effort into bringing us back 3 proposals that were reviewed by city staff. And city staff determined, based on employee needs, that Cigna would best fit for the known employee needs that we had in place. You'll see that we are going from 3 Health First Health plans down to 2 Cigna proposed plans. We are offering what we're calling the Cigna Value Plan in response to the request for a lower costing family plan option. When you compare the benefit structures of the existing city base plan, which is the BP10D base plan, to the benefit structures of the 2 Cigna proposed plans, you'll see that the benefits are matched or better. The only caveat to that is we did see a little bit of an increase in prescription cost, but that will be offset by the lower cost for services and or the lower cost for premiums through their biweekly paychecks. So we had to assume that the plan enrollment would navigate entirely to option 1, which is over assuming the increase. We know, based on the lowered premiums that will be available through the Cigna Value Plan, that we will have some migration of these numbers here in this lower section to option 2, which is going to decrease this overall 0.73 increase. So you'll see here, for example, I was speaking with an employee today who has been here for over 5 years, and she has family coverage on the VP10D base plan. We looked at the 2 proposed benefit structures that were preliminary put together in this agenda item and compared her deduction going from $214.16 biweekly down to $130.27 biweekly. That is due to the fact that she looked at the value plan and determined that it met or was better than what she was currently enrolled in now on the VP10D base plan. So it's a no-brainer for them to transition over to that plan. As detailed in your staff report, Cigna's also offering us a $15,000 wellness credit, which is new to the city. It's not something that we've had before. So that's new and exciting. We do have a dedicated wellness coordinator with both Hylant and Cigna that we can work together with to determine the city's needs, to determine how we can best use those funds. Oops. So the other supplemental benefits that come along with us switching over to Cigna would be virtual care services, which are heavily used these days. It alleviates the need for the employee to leave the workplace essentially at times. It can also allow you to get treatment from the care of your home if you're ill. Active and Fit also provides a fitness benefit to employees that are covered under the Cigna plan. This is not a free gym membership in essence, but it is a $25 a month enrollment fee that allows you to access multiple gyms within the area. For example, we did look at their network, and it includes LA, Anytime, Planet Fitness. So an employee could essentially pay $25 a month and utilize all 3 gyms on 3 different days of the week if they wanted to do that. You can also upgrade to their premium membership, which offers 20 to 70% discounts on specialty gyms such as CrossFit gyms. So there's a wide array of yoga services, things like that, that are in that specialty network as well. There is a prescription discount program that's available to Cigna members. where if they're using a specialty medication, their maximum exposure for a 30-day supply would be $25 per month. And then Cigna also offers an identity force, identity theft protection benefit. What I like best about Cigna is that they have the emotional health and well-being benefit, which sounds very similar when you read over it to an EAP program, because it allows the covered member, whether that's the employee, the spouse, or dependent, 3 sessions face-to-face or virtually with a licensed mental health professional. And that licensed mental health professional that they're seeing for those 3 visits is also included in the Cigna Mental Health Network. So when that care is completed, they seamlessly transition over to the mental health benefit and start paying a copay for those services. Under our EAP currently, they get 6 sessions, which is great, but if they need to transition care, Health First does not always have those physicians considered in network, so they're essentially starting over with services with a new provider. The transition from Health First health plans to Cigna is expected to be quite seamless for the fact that 99% of the providers under Health First are also in Cigna's network. Additionally, we do have the ability to use this pre-enrollment hotline that this slide speaks to. We're also going to start pushing out, pending council approval, start pushing out educational pieces to the employees over the next 30 days in preparation to actually hold in council chambers educational sessions on May 18th. Thereafter, we will host an extended open enrollment period so the employees have plenty of time to make their medical selections. Unless there's questions, it's requested that council approves Resolution 2202-09, selecting the following vendors for the 2022-2023 plan year. Medical going with Cigna, HRA and FSA going with Ameriflex, dental with Principal, vision with Principal, life, disability, and EAP with Lincoln Financial Group, and the supplemental health plan with Colonial, supplemental legal with MetLaw.
Mr. Bentley?
Yeah, I would make a motion that we support the, whatever that number was, 2209, I think. But I do have a question, I guess, once you get a second.
Mr. Bastador?
I too have a question, but I will second the motion.
Okay. Wow, thank you. All right, Mr. Bentley, you're up first.
Yeah, so I do have some prior experience with Cigna from a previous employer, and I do understand they're cheaper, and I think they were in that prior example. The thing I struggled with, and actually many people struggled with, is getting procedures approved. They denied more procedures than our previous insurance companies by far. So I don't know if your thoughts on that.
So I would ask Mr. Dinklage to speak to that. I know that there are several Cigna users in Brevard County that he can speak to, and I don't know if they've had those same issues.
Yes, please.
So to answer that question, I would probably just go back and see how long ago that experience was, because I do think Cigna's processes have changed over the last 4 to 5 years. What I can tell you is we represent about $180 million worth of premium just in Central Florida alone. We represent about 9 municipalities that have currently had a 5-year period with Cigna. And at this point, it would probably be pretty tough to be able to pry away those municipalities from them.
I'm sorry, I missed that last sentence.
To be able to pry those municipalities away from Cigna, because I think the services that they have received for them over the last 5 to 10 years has been very, very well.
Yeah, my experience was with Harris, and it was 5 years ago.
Okay. So through the process of getting a surgery approved and implemented, obviously there's a pre-approval process that your physician has to go through, and I think that process was the same with Health First, that it would be through Cigna, United, or Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Our experience has been that that is similar along all of those processes. What I can tell you is through your staff of 125 employees, our team will make sure they walk through that process appropriately and be able to get those approved. But I would tell you that it's nothing different that we haven't experienced through other the 5 major carriers in the state of Florida.
Yeah, my personal experience was more with diagnostic testing such as PET scans, MRIs, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
You could never get them approved, it felt like, for the employees. Whereas with our previous vendor, even the physicians, for example, I had a PET scan, and even the physician said, I won't even wait for Harris to approve this. They always do.
Right.
But when we went to Cigna, It's like, that ain't happening. You're not getting that test.
Well, I would probably tell you that maybe there was protocols within that plan, because Harris is a large employer. They were probably self-funded. So that's probably going to be looked at a little bit differently than you are currently, that you're going to be fully insured. But I can just assure you that that process is similar and the same, that we're dealing with all the same carriers. Some of them get admitted immediately. Some of them don't need a pre-approval process. Some of them do, to be able to make sure that the doctor is making that as appropriate diagnosis that it needs to be done.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Bachelor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the virtual consultations and visits and other things that will obviously help the employees without them having to leave their workplace, whose responsibility is it to protect the personal information of that person, seeing that they could be having those types of conversations in an open environment that could be overheard?
So I would say that that's the employee's responsibility to make sure they're protecting their protected HIPAA information from being overheard. Maybe going to their vehicle to have that session, or closing their door to have that appointment. I mean, I've personally done that myself.
Sure, but does every employee have access to a location where they could be in a private setting? And is it the employer's responsibility to provide that setting, the employee's responsibility to make sure that they put themselves in that setting, or the provider's responsibility to ensure that the person is in an environment where they're not likely?
I believe that when the employee chooses to take the virtual session opposed to going in person, or to take time off to attend the appointment, that they're making that, decision to make sure that they're protecting their HIPAA information by going to a secured location. To your question of, do they all have, private space that they can go to? I'd like to think that, they could essentially go to their vehicle to do it, but the majority of the city complexes do have a conference room or whatnot that could be utilized.
Okay, I'm just trying to establish
No, it's a great question.
liability, in case there is a disclosure of personal information that may have been overheard by another employee and then shared without the permission.
Yeah, no, great question.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. McDowell.
I'm looking at the attachment 1, which is the breakdown of the cost. I'm trying to understand here, this is the premiums that in aggregate that we figured out what the employees would pay, or is this the monthly for the city?
Attachment 1 in my staff report is this, what's on the screen now. So I'll go to the employees' cost share. Is that what your question's towards?
The bigger question is, I'm seeing the 0.73, which is manageable, you can explain it, but is that, that's just one piece. You still got out-of-pocket expenses, and you weren't able to aggregate or extrapolate what those costs were? Because that's what's going to end up, it's all the things we don't know.
So the out-of-pocket expenses that the employees will incur for services are listed here. The current plans are in white, and then the new plans are in gray. So predominantly, the majority of enrollment is in the base plan, which is the furthest white column here. Then we're calling the OIPI 1 base 1 plan, I'm sorry, base 1, yeah, that's how it is, the base plan, and we're calling the base 2 plan the value plan. The base 1 plan, the intent was to keep it very similarly structured to the VP10D base plan, so there wasn't any real change in the out-of-pocket expense for services. However, as you'll see, Cigna came in cheaper for some services. The intent on the base 2 plan, or also known as the value plan, was to make those services cost a little bit more so we could offer a lower premium for family plan, but you'll see that the out-of-pocket expense for services is still very competitive.
We just can't guess because we don't know what the expenses are going to be, correct? But we do have history.
Well, fortunately, our our plans, I'm sorry, it's past my bedtime. Our plans are very copay structured, so the cost is pretty predictable. We do quote deductible amounts at the top, but the only services that pull from deductible are things like durable medical equipment. Everything else is a very rich copay structure.
So to try to answer your question, if the same type of claims occurred this year that did last year, the employees as a whole, cost will go down. because you
Even
can
in
see
the
that they're-
pharmaceuticals, even in the
well, their
medical.
deductible is less, their out-of-pocket is less, their co-pays are less. So we can't really predict the amount of claims, the amount of prescriptions, the amount of doctor's visits that employees are going to incur. But if the exact same thing happened on a calendar year of 22, 23 that did in 2021, the employees' costs would be less under this plan.
Even if it doesn't work out that way, we can sit here confidently and say, this is our understanding, is that based on everything being equal, it will be less. But things change, so it's volatile. So,
Correct.
right, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Ditmore, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. Kim, I need to jog your memory. When you were at Palm Bay, were you there when they had Health First, or?
So I was part of the committee, the RFP committee that selected Cigna when we were transitioning, tracking towards rolling out Cigna January 1. I left a couple months prior to the implementation.
Okay. So I will tell you that it was, in my opinion, because I was on my wife's plan at the time, was a very, very, very rocky transition. So I'll give you the benefit of the doubt that you said they've made some changes in the last 4 to 5 years. My wife is still on the Cigna plan. I know that the Health First plan here seemed to be a little bit more seamless, easier to get things done. So I would suggest and recommend, and I hope the council will support that maybe that you, when you put this out to the employees, that you also have them participate in surveys when they're using Cigna.
Absolutely. So when we push our education pieces, we'll let them know, as we always do, even with Health First, that if they're experiencing an issue in services or understanding coverage, or they have claims issues,
Customer service.
we'll know to escalate that to human resources. So
Well, I mean, they're having problems with the customer service, yeah.
exactly, we can be that go-between between the employee and Highland. They have an excellent team that's always helped us over the years, even with Health First, and we will work through it.
Yep. So I think we need to probably stay on top of that to monitor that and make sure it's.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We do monitor that. We do run a report on every employee that does call our office with any type of claims issues. We do run a report on every month and provide that to the city's team on how many claims issues, what those claims issues are, how long it took us to be able to resolve. So we do track that in our systems on a HIPAA preferred way to be able to see who's calling in, what's.
Cigna still using the call center outside the area? I think it's like in Sarasota or something they were using before. I may pick up the phone and call if there's an issue. Who am I talking to? Where are they at?
Probably be talking to our office.
And where's that located? It's in Orlando. So I'm not going to be talking to bounce from Sarasota to another place because I went through that a couple of years ago with them. So.
Based off of our volume, we are preferred providers, so we have select account managers that we deal directly with Cigna. So we encourage the employee, if they have any type of issues, that they reach out to our office, and we'll help them handle those issues directly through our office.
So I just want to make sure make sure the employees aren't calling the customer service number and be on the back. They're going to be calling them directly. Is that how that's going to work?
Is it the customer service number that Palm Bay used when they implemented it 7 years ago?
Whatever's on the card, the Cigna card.
I'm pretty sure things have changed since 2015. So we'll definitely keep a good pulse on it, because we definitely do not want employees to experience any issues. On that note, I failed to mention that there is a really good transition of care program for any employee that's currently, or dependent spouse, that's currently utilizing services for a chronic medical condition through Health First. So I will be doing a lot of outreach to the employees to capture whoever is transitioning with their care from Health First to Cigna, to make sure that there's no hiccups there.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to make a few comments. I have not had a good experience with Cigna, but enough years ago where that's kind of history. Just want to talk about a couple of your things. What do you do as far as out of network? How does that work when you need to go out of network?
So there is an out of, well, what I would tell you, there is no out-of-network benefit, but the Cigna network is a national network, where Health First previously was not. It was a tri-county network area. So I would tell you right now that it would be probably pretty tough to find an out-of-network hospital or physician in the state of Florida, let alone the U.S. But again, if you end up going out of network, that will be an out-of-pocket expense that you would pay, just like you did with Health First.
One thing I will add, that with out-of-network, if it's an emergency service, it will be completely covered by the insurer. It can't be emergency to you, like I have a cold and I need to go to urgent care.
No, that's
It
for
needs
both
to be
of them,
True
but-
emergency. Also, since it's a nationwide network, our employees who have college children that are away for school can now jump onto our plan, whereas with Health First, they could not utilize services outside of Brevard County.
So you're saying if we go to Miami or Jacksonville and use you got to get permission to a Cigna, it's still out of network though, isn't it?
You wouldn't need to get permission. You would just find an in-network provider with Cigna, and down in Miami area, that would be very lot of hospitals and doctors to be able to
Okay.
access.
So we're not limited to
No,
Brevard County.
It's a
Okay.
national network across the
Okay.
country.
And as far as labs, we used to use Health First. Now we have to use a different.
There are the two largest labs that you'll be able to use, which are LabCorp and Quest, and those labs are very robust across the state of Florida, much more vast than Health First.
And what about medicines? Where do you get those? Is that
Any pharmacy that you decide you want to shop at.
okay? And last question is the gym. I know we have $15,000. We have, I'm sure a lot of our employees like the concept. I'm a card-carrying member of the gym. I don't use it enough. Some people use it all the time. I'm sure we have statistics on how often that's used. But I was thinking if some places, maybe we can use some of that 15 or all that 15,000. If people go X number of times a month, the city will reward them for the health of it because that's why you like gym membership. So what information do you have that, is there an incentive program? I guess we can construct it.
Yeah,
If you go one time a year or one time or 7 times or whatever number you want to insert per month.
So we unfortunately expected the gym membership to be a huge deal because the employees will be going from a free membership to a $25 a month fee to utilize a larger network of gyms. So we did ask for some numbers from January 1 of this year to March 31st. And out of the 142 eligible members, and I say eligible members because that could be the employee, the spouse, or dependent over 18, there's 142 of those. Only 19 of those members were utilizing this gym membership. So that's 7.5% of the population.
COVID, yeah.
So I think a lot of people like being a card holder as well. Now, we could certainly use our wellness fund to implement something along the lines of, hey, you use your gym membership 4 times a month, and we're going to reimburse you this many dollars. We could definitely utilize the wellness fund for that.
That sounds good. Mr. Bentley?
Thank you, Mayor. So it sounds like apples to apples, the employee cost will go down this year. What about the employer cost?
Isn't that the 0.73%?
So I included a more detailed sheet that's in your staff report that goes over the breakdown of employee versus employer share in one spreadsheet. But you'll see in this bottom chart below, I'm sorry, this is not the sheet that I wanted.
Miss that.
I think it's the one I put in your staff report. So if the employees go from the VP 10D base plan, which is the city's current base plan, to the new Cigna base plan, I believe their costs based on this chart are going to go up a couple dollars. Now, that's not to say that they may look at the benefit structure of the value plan and determine that's going to meet their medical needs. They're still going to save a little bit on copay. Why not transition over to that plan and save money? So the employees would actually save biweekly there. That's why it's really hard to tell you that this 0.73 is going to be accurate, because like I showed here, our assumption is, because we can't predict where they're going to go, which option they're going to choose. Our assumption is with the higher level plan to show a maximum exposure increase of 0.73. It's definitely going to go down from there.
So what we could do is after open enrollment, where the employees decide to enroll, whether it's spouse, family, child, or and which plans they decide, we could run an annual report based off of that enrollment, what that impact would be to the city.
Okay, I think.
The 0.75% is a max increase, for the city. So think of it as under 1% and
Yeah, that's
8% inflation environment and 8% medical cost environment. I think we're doing as well as you can do.
And honestly, my prediction is half of the membership population will actually go to that value-based plan, because even though it's a lower premium and we kind of made it a higher service cost, it's still very comparable to what we have in place now.
No. I think y'all did a very good job. So,
Yeah.
thank you. So we need a motion to approve this. Oh, we do. I just want to see if they want to make sure they want to keep that motion. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, item 13C. This is an appointment to the Planning and Zoning Board. Mr. Ditmore.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Vernon Anderson to the Planning and Zoning Board. And I have a comment on it, if I get a second.
Mr. Frampus.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Ditmore, you have
Thank you, sir. Based on the comments that Mr. Anderson made and taking a review, looking over his background and experience, he's a retired senior non-commissioned officer with the Air Force. He has a background working in planning. And for those of us that served in the military, we understand that the rank that he achieved in that 22-year period is pretty impressive. I think he's a very sharp individual, and I think he would bring a lot to the city to if he was appointed to the Planning and Zoning Board. Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion? Okay. Mr. Bachelor.
So this candidate is prepared to serve on many different boards and failed to provide a CV, which I think is actually a requirement, or at least strongly encouraged. And so the only materials that we have to review for this candidate is what he stated at the podium. Yeah. So I won't be supporting this motion because I do not think that this is the best candidate out of the two candidates that we had. Thanks.
Yeah, I was just also, it looked like Mr. Anderson was willing to serve on 3 different committees. I think that's kind of the point you were making. And the other candidate wants to only serve on 1. You could actually put them both to work if you didn't force him to take the one that was only 1, if that makes sense. That makes sense.
I just was impressed by him. I think he would do well.
Yeah.
So I think he would do well on the Planning and Zoning.
You don't think he would do well on the Parks and Recreation or the Business Advisory Board?
Based on his background, what he explained, I think Planning and Zoning would be great. So.
Sounds like all of them would fit him as well. Mr. Frampus, you have your light on.
Thank you, Mayor. I also agree that Mr. Anderson's experience is kind of unquestionable, and he talked to us. I'm not exactly sure why he didn't give more information. I was curious if how Christy felt about this appointment, and if she's still in the audience, I'd like to hear from her.
She is still in the audience.
1 second.
The bats didn't take me away because I still have another agenda item. So I'm still here, and it's really up to council, just so that everyone knows. You know, we sort of go through an orientation and a little bit of mini training. So regardless of who's chosen, they don't just, come to us fresh with no sort of any sort of orientation as to what they have to do.
The reason I asked, Christy, is because you called around and talked to many of the council members on
I did
supporting of a candidate, and additional information came up that I talked to you today about, and which we won't go into. And I was just wondering if you were still of the same mind.
In terms of direct experience, the other candidate has direct planning experience, so I know that transition would be easier. But like I said, it will be whichever one. We're going to do an orientation. We're going to do lots of discussions, and we will bring whoever gets chosen along into what they need to know about. for the Planning and Zoning Board position.
Well, then, it's part of my understanding that the information that she provided on her application is no longer current, and that she no longer works for the city of Palm Bay in planning, and I was just wanting to make sure council knew that that she's not in that position anymore, and I'm not exactly sure the reasons why she was released. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Young?
I just wanted to say that I met Mr. Anderson when he was here, and he was very impressive. I thought he would be super on that board. However, Stephanie Kelly, although Mr. Frempus just told us she's no longer at Palm Bay, she was a planner, or she may be a planner elsewhere now. She's already trained and knows all about planning, so I just think it would be kind of obvious that she would go on the Planning and Zoning Board. Mr. Anderson is willing to serve on the Business Advisory Board, and I've been the liaison for that board for a long time. I think he'd be perfect on there. When he was here, just listening to him speak, I absolutely thought he would be better used. His leadership especially would be better used on the Business Advisory Board. He has more input on the Business Advisory Board. So I kind of like him for that board, and to go ahead with someone who already is a planner on the planning board. Just my thoughts. Thank you.
Can they serve on more than one board if they're on the P&Z?
No, sir. Sorry. No, sir.
That's a no? Okay. I guess we're learning a little new information. I remember not everything she said, but she just basically started as a planner, and now 2 weeks later, she's no longer a planner with the same organization. That's what I heard, if that's true. So, that's, I like stability, so I will be supporting Mr. Anderson. All right, we have a motion, we have a, Mr. Francis has a question.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, but I just wanted to know, it's not hearsay. I had asked Christy to check into this, and through Ms. Gale, that was confirmed through Palm Bay. So it's not a rumor, it was confirmed. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Okay. Let's just do a roll call vote on this. The motion on the floor is to appoint Mr. Anderson to the P&Z board. Yeah. So you start off with Mr. Ditmore on that.
Yes, Mr. Ditmore, aye. Okay. Mr. Bachelor? Councilmember Bentley?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Young?
Aye.
Councilmember Frampus?
Aye.
Councilmember McDowell?
Aye.
Mayor Rose?
Aye. Motion passes 6-1 with Bachelor voting nay. All right. Our next item up is appointment to the Board of Adjustment. Appoint Karina Sevilla to the Board of Adjustments with a term ending 2023. Mr. Ditmore?
So moved.
Ms. Young?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on that one? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. That brings us to the management reports, I believe.
Well, what about sustainability?
We're not, that's after this one. Management reports, America's Best Value in follow-up report, asterisk. Would you like to do that?
Yes, sir. I will be thrilled to present that to you, and I'm just going to take a second here while the presentation comes up. I will tell you, I think we have good news, and it's certainly not time to unfurl a mission accomplished banner or anything like that. But we're trending in the right direction. Improvements have been made. Numbers back that up. I think police department is satisfied, happy with the level of cooperation they've received from the property operator. As you'll see, there's still problems and there's still a lot of room for improvement, but it is trending in the right direction. All right, so I'll start off. If you remember last time, Officer Paz talked about the what he calls a SEPTED that he did, a crime prevention through environmental design process, where he did a thorough analysis of the property over a number of days, considered a number of factors, made various recommendations. Many of those recommendations have been put in place and implemented at this point by the operator. The exterior lighting has been significantly upgraded to bright LEDs. 2 flock cameras have been installed on the property, and I've gone through every single incident report generated this year, and they've been useful already in several cases. And per Lieutenant Romano, they've been useful in a preventative and proactive policing capacity as well. They've corrected gaps in the fence along the west side of the property that had been a problem previously. They are issuing guest parking passes and enforcing that program. They followed the recommendation for landscaping, trimming for improved visibility. Speed bumps have been installed throughout the property for traffic calming and also to discourage drive-through illicit activity. Window treatments were removed from the lobby. That allows for the folks working in the office now to naturally surveil the property and see what's going on. There's a coffee station available in the lobby bar area for guests, which reduces some of the pedestrian traffic off-site. No cash accepted for check-in, which is obviously a big deal. Curbs actually were being painted today. Chief Wiley reported to me. I knew they were being prepared for that, but they were being painted today to aid in property delineation. Fence enclosures with added security framing are being installed around dumpsters, so they are still in the process of implementing some of these recommendations made through the SEPTED. All right, the sort of headline that got council's attention to the America's Best Value problem last year were an unusual number of deaths at the property. We had 6 deceased persons there last year. One of those was natural causes. There was another suicide, but we did have a third that was a homicide. And then significantly, 3 of the city's 11 drug overdose deaths in 2021 all occurred at the America's Best Value Inn, including 2 of those that occurred in the first quarter of last year. This year, the number is 0. So we're still just in the first quarter, but no overdose deaths this year. We have had, and we talked about one at a council meeting earlier this year, we have had 2 non-fatal overdose or Marchman drug cases this year. That compares with 15 last year, which averages about 4 a quarter. I don't have at my fingertips a breakdown of how many of those overdoses were for first quarter. I do know there were 2 deaths, but that's about a 50% reduction statistically. Of the 32 incidents that we have had in the first quarter there this year, and you'll see, and for purposes of this, when I'm describing service calls and incidents, I eliminated the patrol area request figures, which is just a number stating that an officer visited the property. It didn't necessarily result in any activity. It's just so I focused just on actual incidents. Now, some of those incidents or reports turned out to be not accurate, unfounded. Nothing comes of it, but those are still included. Last year, though, they averaged 71 incidents a quarter. First quarter this year, they're down to 32. Of those 32 incidents, 10 or about a third of them were traffic related, mostly expired tags, driving while license suspended, vehicle registration sort of issues. There were several mental health, Baker Act, suicide threat or attempt cases there. There was a loud music complaint. There was one very serious battery there, resulting in extensive investigation. It did involve people who knew each other prior to there. It wasn't a sort of random strong-arm robbery in a room or something like that. But there has been in the first quarter one serious battery. There have been a handful of narcotics arrests there. They've all involved personal possession of paraphernalia with residue on it. We're not talking about arresting dealers with large quantities of drugs there. And I believe all of those arrests, except for maybe one, were incidental to a traffic stop. Most of the significant incidents there have resulted in trespass. Well, all of the significant incidents there have resulted in the person involved, the suspect, being trespassed from the property. One of the incidents, in fact, the very first incident in this quarter, was an arrest for criminal trespass of a subject who had been trespassed from the property last year. So that's effective and it's working, and the property owner has been very cooperative in both having these individuals trespassed and also alerting the police department when they become aware that someone who's been trespassed from the property for criminal issues comes back to it. So, Chief, you can speak to it if you'd like, but I think it's fair to say that the police department, again, while not satisfied, things can certainly improve. I think they appreciate the cooperation they have received and would tell you that it is certainly trending in the right direction there. So, I thank council for bringing this to our attention, bringing our focus to it, and tasking us with doing this, because we're seeing results, and hopefully those results not only continue, but the situation improves more, because you can see there's still work to be done. Those 32 incidents there, like I said, most of them relatively minor. That's still more activity than you'd like to see for one location.
Thank you. Mr. Bentley?
Yeah, I'd just make a comment that, I think the owner came and spoke to the council last year and made all these promises, and it looks like they've actually fulfilled a lot of it. So, since he took the time to come before the council, I'd like to see us get word back to him that we appreciate their efforts, because, there's a 50% difference between last year and this year. First quarter, I get it. But I think, we owe them. Say, hey, thanks. You did what we asked, and there's measurable results to date. So hopefully we'll do that and let at least from my perspective, I appreciate what they've done.
We will do that. Now, I do recommend that we continue to monitor. My proposed next step is that I report back to you next quarter with a similar report, hopefully still trending in the right direction. Continue the holistic crime prevention approach, both through continuing to work with the operator on their business practice and environmental design improvements, combined with our emphasis on, we know we need to do the proactive policing there, investigation and enforcement. Those cameras are, they're very good there. They're well located. They pick up all the traffic going in and out, and they're a really good tool for the PD to have there. And again, the operator did that at their own expense and allows us complete access to everything that comes out of there, all the data from those.
Mr. Ditmore?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things. I would tell you, based on the clientele and the people that come there, I would say this is probably the absolute best that we could probably do better maybe, but I will say this is phenomenal. I want to commend the chief and the police department. The undertaking to do this is not easy, and it takes a lot of manpower to do these things, and it's probably more of a model that could be used other places, because it wasn't just enforcement; it was a combination of everything, and to actually pull this off. I had my reservations that something like that could be done, if you can imagine, but because I've seen a lot of things like these things fail before. So, but it's a phenomenal job by the police department, and also Mr. Richardson put a lot of time in this, and he should be commended as well as the owner. I will tell you that I'm glad that you guys were able to put something together to have them follow. And I'm glad that they decided to do that. But really, our staff should be and I mean, the police department, the chief and the city attorney, they really should be recognized for this, because this is actually something that, to me, is amazing. They were able to pull this off. So thank you.
Thank you, but we'll continue to trust and verify, and we recognize there's still work to be done, so thanks.
Mr. Reagan. Deputy Mayor Young?
Thank you, Mayor. So the calls that were for expired tags and that sort of thing, that was due to those special PD cameras, right?
Most of that, actually, because the cameras haven't been up for the whole quarter, a lot of that is just because our officers are out there and they know that's a hot spot in a high crime area, and they routinely travel through the parking lot and they routinely run tags as they go through the parking lot. And, you know, at an average of about once or twice a week, they get a tag that shows either the operator has a suspended license, or it's an expired tag, or something else that results in a traffic stop. I don't know that any of the traffic stops yet have been initiated as a result of the cameras, but the cameras have been used in investigating the crimes that have occurred. But also the cameras can flag when you have a repeat customer with an outstanding warrant or something of that nature. So that's going to be a very good tool. But most of those traffic incidents are just good police work, just the police out there working the job.
Thank you. That was going to be my next question. So if the cameras are doing the work, then our officers can be on the road. They don't have to be patrolling in there, but that's part of their job. But I wanted to ask, are those the same kind of cameras that are the plate readers that we have on a vehicle that are rolling? So when they read the plate, see it's expired, they would know if it's a stolen plate or a stolen vehicle? Or
Exactly. Any kind of flag on that, it runs through the system, and that information actually, because of the cooperation of the operator, is going directly to the police department. And if one of you wants to speak to it, you can probably explain it a lot better than I can. I know Tony Romano's just thrilled about it and could talk about it for an hour, but
so the camera calls the police department, it radios. How does it contact and let an officer know that there's a
why don't you come on up? But I believe it's a sort of a computer operated system. I'm not sure who gets the alert at PD when something like that happens, but
so the way it works is we get alerted either through their computer in the car, or it's a text message or email. So the difference between a regular license plate reader and the flock camera system is, historically, we can go back and say, 2 days ago somebody committed a crime, and we just got a report of it. Like, say, that happens all the time. We can go back and trace where that car left that area, because it keeps that information in the flock system. The license plate readers don't do that. It's real time. So when something happens, a car is stolen, and it'll let you know that the car has been stolen, because it picks it up on the license plate reader. Flock camera system does both. It'll let you know that the car was stolen, but also we can trace the steps of that car, a bicycle, a person, and then the really good thing about it is you can put in, say it's a black SUV, and a crime occurred, say at Walmart. Well, you can put in a black SUV, and it'll pick up every black SUV that the flock camera pass through the flock camera area.
So the Sirius battery, for example, they had suspects associated with the battery, but there were vehicles tied to the suspects, and the flock's searchable. So rather than watching hours and hours of video, they could search and pinpoint times vehicle came and went and things like that as they're building the case.
So the other beautiful part about it is we also share that information with other flock camera systems. Palm Bay has them. Melbourne's getting 20 of them. We're getting called by the federal agencies to track cars that go through our city, and we've given that information. Matter of fact, we're keeping a sheet, a tally of every success story with flock. And I'm going to have Tony Romano do a presentation to you, so you can see the different success stories we've had with it. But they're phenomenal in a lot of ways. Tony, he's very excited about this, so I just put him in charge of the whole system. But to answer your question, officers love it, because now we get hits all the time, every day. And sometimes it's just maybe a stolen tag, or it could be a wanted person from another area. Interesting enough, the flock camera system, I don't know if you remember the shooting that happened, and Rich, help me out with the shooting that happened in the Seminole County. Come on up here, Deputy Chief. And this is a really good story because, and Rich knows the situation a little bit better than me. Can you explain?
It was the shooting that happened in Seminole County at the mosque where the suspect fled the scene, and we put the tag into Flock and actually called Indian River County to let them know that the suspect vehicle is hitting off their Flock cameras. They were already on it. They did the same thing we did. As soon as the bolo came out, we entered the tag information into the system. They did the same. And when we were calling them to say, hey, we're getting hits on your system, they said, yeah, we're already out with them, and we just had a deputy involved shooting with the person. So.
Wow.
A lot of benefits to it. So very different than a license plate reader. So there's a benefit that the LPRs don't give us that the Flock system does.
All right.
And interesting enough, now that other agencies in the area, they're all starting to get them. And like I said, Palm Bay I think they have up to what, Rich, around 20 some? And then Melbourne, I had the conversation with the chief, and I talked him into it basically, and he says, well, and he's getting 20, and I think he's adding another 5 on top of it.
So have the Flock cameras made our plate reader cameras obsolete?
I would say that they're way better than just the license plate readers. And we have both, by the way.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's the ones that are rolling with the plate reader, and that's all it does.
And we
Has
get
it
hits
now-
on that, and we make arrests off of that. And I think we had a couple stolen cars, and we had a pursuit just recently that was terminated right away, but the suspect jumped out of the vehicle, and we ended up capturing him. So that was a Flock camera. And it's every day I'm hearing little stories, and I want Tony to stay out of my office because I don't want to hear any of the stories. I'll get the success stories on the Tuesday meeting.
All right, thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
All right. Anyone else? All right, we're kind of running out of time in this meeting, so let's go on to sustainability report and then council reports and see if we can wrap up by 10:30.
There is no presentation for this. I just wanted to thank Malia Staker. She's a planning intern for all the hard work she did, put a lot of hours, very talented individual. And so we were doing as requested, and we'll try to answer any questions. I know you have some comments. I know the meeting's also almost at the end, so it's however you all want to handle it.
Thank you. Mr. Ditmore.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a quick question about the report. I was actually read through it, and it looks to me like it was like some of the stuff was cut and pasted from some other template. Did we use a template for this, or did you just did this report all by hand? I did it all by hand. Okay. So my question is, as I look at through this, because it really bothered me when I looked at this, I thought, why is there an expectation that the city of West Melbourne is going to be helping the United Nations with third world countries? Now, I've worked in third world countries, so I just want to know how the city of West Melbourne is supposed to do that. I'm not quite sure.
And that's a valid point. I mean, it's just a set of metrics that we use. The UN seem to have the most complete set of metrics, and you're right. I mean, there's things on there that we're not going to be able to meet.
Yeah,
so if, from sort of the perspective of sustainability, from, the holistic global kind of perspective, we did add a little blurb to that, but to the fact of being able to put in the details like we did about the water and some of the transportation, no, we're not going to be able to kind of hit them.
Right. And I noticed there was the, what did you call it, the islands, the pedestrian, what did they call it, the pedestrian, I don't have.
Refuge Island.
Thank you, the refuge islands.
Like that, yeah.
So when I hear that, I think of sort of what I saw today, a pedestrian on a refuge island in Melbourne when he jumped out in front of traffic to take money from someone. He almost caused a rear-end accident in front of him. Are we talking about that type of pedestrian island, or are we
No,
talking about
we're talking about, I don't know, did you go through any of the TPO and their group when they did that Minden Road feasibility study?
Right.
they presented sort of like when you're crossing, say, like from the schools over to the park,
Right.
that if you do cross, and you get caught in the median there, you don't have a lot of protection. So what they were describing with some of the graphics was sort of having a little more buffering around you if you get caught in that situation and you're in the middle of Minton
Right.
Road in the median. That's all that refers to.
That's
We can
fine.
certainly add
That's
to
fine. I think that I think that as we move forward, that anything that we do on a sustainability issue here should be more realistic to what we can do in West Melbourne, so that we could plan for and actually move forward in that direction. These ideas about what the United Nations is going to do, that's great. I mean, everybody's got their opinions about the United Nations, and I've got mine. So I've seen them in action in third world countries, and most of the people in this room have not. So I will tell you, I'm not impressed.
We
So
can certainly pare it down. It was a place to start.
yeah, I know. I just wanted to just kind of give you my 2 cents on it. So thank you.
Mr. McDowell?
Thank you, Mayor. And we just need to, and I know we're going to do a disservice here, trying to do this in 10 minutes or less for a sustainability program for the city of West Melbourne, I think is not appropriate.
Would you like to bring it back? I mean, we can.
Well, I think it needs more discussion, but I do want to say that heck of a job. I mean, it's a lot of work here that's been put into this, but also understand that we've got a little bit of a disconnect here, because this is about cities and communities, SDG 11. There are 17 initiatives, and so we need to figure out how that makes sense. But I don't want to take anything away from it, because it's great foundation, great information specific to what they were determining as communities. And they're just guidelines, information. It was my understanding was that our goal was, and I had not been involved, I've seen it when you guys saw it, was that this would be our starting point.
It would be, yes.
Right? We would use this to kind of determine, and that's where the committee, whether it's an ad hoc committee, a temporary committee, or it's bolted on to one of the existing committees or whatever, would use this document as kind of a living document to start to scrutinize, get rid of some of that stuff. I'd rather see you do it this way and put all that peripheral stuff that we're like, I was reading it going, really?
I had an employer who said that you add in a lot of details. It's much easier to cut than it is to add.
So I hear you. I just think that this is just preliminary. I mean, I know it's a lot of work, but there's a lot of other things, like climate change is implicated in all different levels of the city, and so, or in those other 17 SDGs, so kind of keep that in mind. Thank you.
Mr. Bentley, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. I've hired a lot of interns in my life and a lot of engineers as well. And, we can argue about certain things in here that we think ought to be included or ought not to be included. But the quality of the product, I thought, was outstanding.
She's phenomenal. She is absolutely phenomenal.
And I read this and I said, I've not seen many interns at Harris, and I spent 40 years, that right out of the gate produce something of this quality, and it's put together so well.
With very little guidance. I gave her the direction, go, and she went.
I hear what John's saying and all these things, and that's good. But, for someone that is at an intern level, this is a really high-quality product. So I just wanted to commend you for that. And I've seen a lot of interns. Thank you, Mayor.
Very nice. I just want to concur with that. But I want to see, what is your takeaway from this report? I know, and you have 3 minutes or less. No.
Well, honestly, this report really helped me learn about the city itself. So when I walked in here, I didn't know really anything, just besides that I would drive around on 192 here and there, or I'd go to the park every now and then, but I didn't know what projects were going on. I didn't know what we've accomplished. So this report really introduced me to what West Melbourne provides.
I think that was my takeaway too, is just getting perspective, all the little things like how many mobile homes were built and how many this and that, and it just kind of put it in a document, whether we call it sustainability or not. It's a good just a good reference. I might even keep it. I haven't decided yet. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. All right. Let's go ahead and thank y'all. Real quick, let's get everybody's council reports, even if we have to run over a minute or two. Up first is Councilmember Pat Bentley.
No report, Mayor. There you go.
Deputy Mayor Young.
I think I've said enough for tonight. No report.
Councilmember McDowell.
I do have one thing I wanted to announce.
You can take their time.
It's very important. It's not about me. And this one is about the Brevard County today, because this is the month of older Americans, and they honored our very own Sandy Mickelson. So I just want to take a minute to acknowledge her.
Trying to say she's...
Are you offended by that, Sandy? You're not offended by that. I didn't know who nominated. Sandy, just for the record, I do not consider you an old person. I thought you were young. Thank you.
Councilmember Stephen Frampus.
No report.
Thank you. Councilmember Bachelor.
Well, now I'm going to really disappoint you because in potentially more than one way, but it's always been my plan to complete my 4-year term serving as the best interests of the City of West Melbourne residents, as they were so gracious to elect me in 2018. But sadly, those plans to serve out my 4 years have not come to fruition. And with such important decisions coming before the City Council this summer, it is within the best interests of the city moving forward that I actually step down from the City Council. On May the 31st, that will be my last day as a resident of West Melbourne, at which point I'll no longer be eligible to remain serving as a council member. Our family has decided to relocate for personal reasons, and our decision is in no way a reflection on the City of West Melbourne. The city is run incredibly well, with a dedicated and talented staff providing the best services that it is possible to deliver. I informed the city manager and the city attorney of this decision last Friday, and I will now turn it over to them so that they can walk us through the timeline and process for filling this upcoming vacancy, and so that it can be properly explained. So, thank you.
Wow. Can we have a motion to extend the meeting?
Yeah, so moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Sorry, who was the second? You or me?
Yeah. Any opposed?
Sitting in shock.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in shock.
Can I make a comment on this?
Yes, that's why I extended the meeting. 3 minutes.
Dan, I got to tell you, our political views are probably not always aligned, but I will tell you, you have brought something here, and I'm not just saying this, I've told people this, that you're one of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my life. And sometimes I feel quite dumb when I try to have a conversation with you. And I think you really have brought something amazing. And people have said, what do you think about this? I said, look, you have no idea. I said, the guy really, really brings that level of intelligence and is able to really make it seem like we're a little bit smarter than we really aren't. So I want to tell you, from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate what you've done here. And hey, if you want to come stay at my place for a while for the next 6 months, you can, and I'm kind of half joking about that, but I'm just saying.
that kind of arrangement was actually considered at one point, but it's not feasible, no.
I got a spare room upstairs. It's all right.
Deputy Mayor Young, did you have a comment?
Dan, it has been a pleasure serving with you. Your insight on things made me look at things from a different point of view. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor and a pleasure to serve with you. And I tell everybody that because they ask me, how's that Limey guy doing? They do. Well, of course they do. And I say he's been wonderful. He's really been a great addition to the council. You've made this council as good as it is right now. This is a great council. I've been on quite a few of them. And so it's been a pleasure, and thank you for all that you brought. I did not mean that as a disparaging word. You know that, I'm sure.
I've been called worse. Yeah.
I'm just telling you, this is what residents have asked, and I have expounded on your value to the council. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I concur with all that's said and more. I don't want this to be my closing comment, so, I mean, you definitely added a lot. Just the way you explain things really puts us and makes us think, and I appreciate that. And I think we'll have a lot of time. Well, we have another 2 meetings with you. Good.
Yeah.
And many special meetings we can have between that so we can see you more, that we can properly say goodbye. But thank you, and best wishes to you and your family, because I know that wasn't an easy decision. And so I guess you probably sold your house, is what you're saying?
That's why I'm telling you now.
Yeah. Well, congratulations in this market.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. Councilmember Ditmore.
No report.
Well, I thought you were going to resign or something.
I'm not going to let him do it alone, Mayor.
There is some time sensitivity, so I did want the city manager and city attorney to explain the timeline and process moving forward here, because there is a bit of a time crunch. Yeah.
So if you'd like to give direction.
I'll do my report quick and then I'll let you.
Sure.
Just real quick, went through all the regular things. The Mayor's Fitness Challenge ended, and they gave us an award for congratulations, City of West Melbourne. Thank you for encouraging your city residents in the 2022 Health First Mayor's Fitness Challenge. Through physical fitness, you have encouraged West Melbourne's children and their families to become healthier. We had a total of 336,856 total minutes of exercise. All right. Applause, please. No, that was a lot of minutes, even though we didn't come in first, second, third, or fourth, or fifth. We were definitely ahead of. I think Melbourne has the most chance for the most improvements, followed by Palm Bay. So I'm sure we'll do it again next year. But it's good that everybody took more steps than they did the year before. Thank you.
Not everybody, Mayor. We were trending better before my injury.
I remember last year you were the MVP for the city of West Melbourne. But that's all I have. So go ahead and tell us the process, because I know our charter says certain things. And
Sure. Well, as you know, the charter provides that if a vacancy in council occurs 90 days or more prior to the next regularly scheduled election, that council is to appoint someone to fill the vacant seat until that election. Councilmember Bachelor, his seat would have been up for election this year anyway, so it will remain so. That seat will be filled by election in the November election regardless. However, you are going to be required, because he is making his resignation effective as of the end of May. That's more than 90 days prior to the election. So you will have to appoint someone to fill that seat until the election. In the past, we've done an application process. If you want to let me know, if you want to consider it at the first meeting after the effective date of the council member's resignation, that would be the June 7th meeting. I can prepare a form of application that we can start advertising on the website so that you could receive applications for the vacancy.
why would we? Yeah.
Do we start the notice now, or do we have to wait?
That's what I'm saying. I can get that application and notice out immediately. You look. Is there a question?
I didn't ask a question yet. No, but I guess it's like the other people that we're replacing. You can start the process before the actual day that he leaves.
Absolutely. That's why I would put an application out, as soon as, if you tell me tonight that you are going to appoint and tell me the date you're going to consider the appointment, then I can get that application out and the information with it so that we can start getting those in, processing them, so we can give them to you as part of an agenda. That's what we've done in the past.
I think we're looking for direction that you would consider an appointment at the first meeting in June, so there would be no gap in service.
Oh, yes, that sounds, I like that. I don't know how many days you want to advertise this, but we have plenty of time. But I think start the process tomorrow, and, I mean, we have the same forms. It's not that complicated, so.
That's all I'm asking, if that meeting date is good for council to consider the appointment, the June 7th meeting date, which will be the first meeting after, because his resignation is not effective immediately. It's not until the end of May.
Unless he changes his mind, no. Yeah, keep talking. But the other part of the charter, it does say, since there's only 6 votes, it could be a tie, then you go out to special election, if that would happen, or whatever you do. That's part of the charter.
Well, it is. If you were to fail to appoint someone within a certain amount of time after the vacancy, within 60 days after the vacancy occurs, the charter says that you would call a special election. Now, obviously, council won't put us in that situation where we're paying taxpayer money for a special election on the eve of the general election. So I trust that you will find 4 votes to appoint a qualified candidate to fill the vacancy.
Sounds good. Any other comments on that? Any other direction? How do we plan on getting the word out, I guess? Because do we have a newsletter going out, or I don't think we just had one.
Yeah, there won't be a timely newsletter opportunity. So, in the website, Friday memo, any other avenues you'd like us to pursue.
I think we had time. If we had time, we should have done it. But we do have our marquee out here. Again, we want to get to all the citizens of West Melbourne and give them opportunity. I don't know what the best way is, whether we send them out something. I don't know. So how do we get the word out to everyone?
Robocall?
Yeah. Okay.
Text messages to everybody?
When it was mine, I think we just put it in the Friday report and in the Sunday.
Yeah,
We can do a press release and see who picks it up in addition to our Friday memo and website.
I think Councilmember Ditmore said it, we did this not that long ago, and so, we were pretty successful, right? We got the right person, right?
Listen, I'm going to tell you, it all depends on who you're talking to.
All right, so
Let's just follow the same process.
Yeah. Keep it on the marquee, and we have the Field of Dreams. You can put it there too. And you'll have a deadline established whenever that will be and time to do
It
that.
has to be sufficient time prior to the council meeting that we can sort of vet the applications and make sure you don't.
Must be a registered voter, live in the city, all that.
Right.
We probably are looking the 1 week prior to that, just to give us a couple of days.
At least, yeah. But since we're putting it out now, that's a lot of time to receive applications. So even if we cut it off a few weeks before, that's still plenty of time for people to apply.
But hopefully, people that's involved with the city would know that there's an opening in the city, and otherwise we don't want to find somebody under a rock and just applying because the position is open. So, all right, any questions for city manager, city attorney? Seeing none, we'll adjourn this meeting at 10:40. Good job, Eric.